A young man named Mizuki is sitting on his sofa, eating toast and sipping a cup of coffee for breakfast while watching television. The news channel shows a dungeon with goblins emerging from it and the police struggling to drive them off. It has been a few years since dungeons suddenly appeared all over the world, leading to such surreal and unsettling situations. Government leaders are in chaos, but the resources within the dungeons promise enormous profits. A new treaty was signed by the director of the Public Labyrinth Resource Department, aiming to exploit these rare resources. This department was created to manage the new dungeons, and the debate over whether public safety or the pursuit of these rare resources is more important intensifies daily. The director of the Public Labyrinth Resource Department mentions their strong protest against the country's unfair monopoly on mithril metal. Even though the dungeons are dangerous, human desire knows no limits. As Mizuki changes the channel on the TV, a newsperson is asking questions about whether the adventurers entering the dungeons are even qualified to face such overwhelming dangers, and whether it's as scary as allowing only some people to have guns. Mizuki thinks they are a troublesome lot. The person being interviewed mentions that they say it's only for the monsters in the dungeon, but no matter what they call it, some folks will use their skills for bad things. He reflects on how desire leads to corruption. Mizuki thinks that people will get used to anything as time goes on. Realizing he is late for work, Mizuki checks his watch and rushes toward the subway. As he stands among a crowd of people in suits, all heading to their respective destinations, he marvels at how quickly people have adapted to this new world of dungeons where fantasy exists. When he reaches his office, his boss informs him that he is being transferred. Mizuki is being transferred to the countryside. As he surveys the area, he wonders if a brokerage firm is even needed in a place like this. Looking at the map, he realizes he's getting close to his destination. When he arrives, he sees a crowd gathered and wonders what has happened. As he makes his way forward, he sees a collapsed building with a dungeon door. The entire structure is in ruins, and a dungeon has appeared in its center. Mizuki asks a bystander if this was Kowa Securities and what happened. The person recounts hearing a loud noise, and when they came to see, the place was in shambles. The bystander notes that had Mizuki been there the previous day, he might have been caught in the destruction. Yesterday this was Kowa Securities. Today, it's a dungeon. Mizuki is still confused as he was transferred to a dungeon. He wonders if anyone was still in the building. If there was someone inside, they are definitely in trouble as there's no way to communicate from inside. A brand new, unexplored dungeon that hasn't been captured yet could be dangerous, especially since Mizuki isn't an adventurer and could get in trouble if he goes in without permission. Despite this, he decides to enter the dungeon. The bystander warns that it's dangerous, but Mizuki thanks him for his concern and explains that his colleagues could be trapped in there. As he steps into the darkness, Mizuki notices that the dungeon looks like something out of a video game. He has read that newborn dungeons ignore the laws of physics and continue to internally deform and regenerate. If that's true, it would be difficult to search for colleagues and recover customer files. Suddenly, a screen appears out of nowhere. It's a status screen. Mizuki thinks he shouldn't get so excited. Dungeons are thought to be connected to another world with laws of reality that are slightly different from this world. Those who stay in the dungeon for a period of time evolve to adapt to the new laws, and as they evolve, their status changes. But there is no one in the world who knows the truth. Mizuki checks his status and wonders why it is presented as a game-like RPG. He finds that he is at level 49, HP 229, and MP 0. There are many categories he isn't familiar with, and he decides to check what they are online later, but he notices that his knowledge is high, likely due to the high level of Japan's education system. He thinks it might be the same in other developed countries. As he moves forward, Mizuki accidentally kicks a precious gold goblet, revealing a trail of treasure, gold coins, weapons, and other items like something out of Hansel and Gretel. He realizes that the customer files are unlikely to have survived, and even if they did, they wouldn't be as valuable as the mountain of treasure he's seeing. At the end of the trail, there's a treasure chest that also looks like it's straight out of a game, just like the status screen. As Mizuki slowly opens the chest, contemplating how it could be poisoned and he will be in trouble, he finds a book inside. The book shows skill and status written on it. He appreciates how the book has a user-friendly interface. It is a skill book, something Mizuki has never seen on the news. When he opens it, the book looks like something used for holding cards. He remembers having one in childhood for a card game. He finds that only one slot is filled by a card, which reads Fire, a magic skill. As he examines the skill book, he hears a girl's shriek. Mizuki thinks she might be an employee caught in the dungeon outbreak. He overhears her telling someone that they shouldn't eat her because she's not delicious. He rushes toward the noise. Mizuki encounters 3 goblin-like monsters with a fairy tied to a stick, ready to roast her over a fire. Seeing Mizuki, the fairy cries out for help, pleading with him to save her. With her hands tied to the stick, she cries that she will become a roasted fairy. The goblins growl as they look at him. Mizuki recognizes the goblins from what he's seen online. They're small like junior high school students, but with the muscles of bodybuilders. He realizes that running away isn't an option as he will not be able to escape. The goblins start attacking him. Mizuki dodges the attacks and remembers from the summary site that their weakness is magic. He quickly opens the skill book, points it at them, and triggers a fire attack. He is surprised that it really worked. The goblins, scared of the magic, flee. Seizing the opportunity, Mizuki grabs the stick with the small fairy and runs away. The fairy celebrates and thanks him for saving her life. After they've run a safe distance, Mizuki realizes they've lost their way. The fairy thanks him again, expressing her gratitude and saying that he is her life savior. If he had been any later, she would have been a miserable roasted fairy. As Mizuki untangles her from the stick, the fairy begins to fly. Mizuki asks if she's a real fairy, to which she replies that she is. When he asks for her name, she gets annoyed by the human tendency to name all things. She tells him to call her whatever he likes. If he has trouble choosing, he can call her Keshi. Mizuki introduces himself, and the fairy tries to pronounce his name, struggling with the syllables. After several failed attempts, she decides to call him Zuki. Frustrated with trying to teach her his name, he agrees she can call him Zuki. Mizuki is surprised that she can talk. She dismisses his question, saying it's as obvious as asking if rain is wet, and calls his question stupid. Mizuki then reflects on the fact that intelligent dungeon creatures capable of speaking to humans haven't been discovered yet, thinking that his discovery could be the find of the century. Seeing Mizuki lost in thought, the fairy asks what's on his mind. He then asks if she understands Japanese. She folds her arms and remarks that Mizuki, being an inferior human, is bound to the material plane and comments on the general poor state of the human race. Mizuki sarcastically notes that her remark was more than 1 word, more like 10. The fairy starts explaining that she has a mountain of information about astounding creatures known as fairies, but then notices that Mizuki seems to be in a hurry. He thinks about finding his way back due to all the running around, and is also concerned about how much battery is left on his phone, which is his only light source. Plus, he hasn't found any of his colleagues. The fairy, sensing his thoughts, says fairies can perceive what lowly inferior species are thinking. Mizuki is irritated and asks her if she can talk to him without insulting him. She then agrees to guide him a little as a thank you for saving her life. She points in one direction and begins to fly, asking Mizuki to follow her. As Mizuki heads in the direction Keshi is taking him, he asks what is in that direction. The fairy replies that she has been spinning in the dungeon for a long time and thinks she can finally get out. Mizuki confirms that this means they are near the exit. She replies it's not close, but it will appear soon. She shares that she's been trapped in this dungeon for 4 years, and it has been quite the experience. Mizuki is shocked by the timeline, realizing that the first dungeon appeared in the world 4 years ago. He feels like he could understand more if he thought about it for a moment. As they continue running, Mizuki accidentally kicks a golden cup and realizes they've found the trail that was near the entrance when he first came in. She opposes Mizuki's statement, saying this sort of stuff wouldn't be near the entrance. Suddenly, something happens to Keshi. She says that she can feel something her sensitive radar is reacting, and then she flies in a different direction. Mizuki runs after her, asking if the exit is nearby. But when they reach it, Keshi peeks inside and then hides behind a wall. Confused, Mizuki wonders what happened to the exit. Keshi insists they should find another way out and not use this exit. Mizuki, still puzzled, moves towards the exit to see what's there. She tries to stop him, warning him to avoid looking inside for the sake of his mental health. But Mizuki doesn't heed her words and insists on seeing what's there. When he finally looks, he sees a dragon guarding the exit. Now both Mizuki and Keshi are terrified, hiding beside the exit and relieved that the dragon didn't see them. Mizuki starts discussing with Keshi if they could somehow deal with the dragon. Keshi adamantly insists that he must be out of his mind, calling him stupid. However, Mizuki suggests that the dragon is asleep. They might be able to sneak past it and escape. Keshi argues that the dragon is asleep, but if he notices them, he will wake up and kill them instantly. They would be frozen in its icy breath, stuck in a block of ice, and buried under snow forever. Mizuki thanks her for the vivid ending. Mizuki asks how far the other exit is. She explains that it's too far for her to detect. She finally sensed this one after wandering for 4 years and was approaching it when she was caught by the goblins. Mizuki realizes they have no choice but to go through this exit. Keshi then asks if Mizuki has any skills or magic that could help them fight the dragon. He mentions that he has a flame card. She firmly believes that he cannot fight a dragon with a toy like that. She then asks him to show his sword. He admits that he has no other skills. He's just a security man. Keshi begins to interview him about his job and what kind of skills he needs for the job. Mizuki explains that he is a salesman with sales and financial skills. She dismisses these as people skills and commercial skills and calls them totally useless. Mizuki points out that if it weren't for his skills, she'd still be tied to that skewer being roasted. They both give each other a snarky look but sigh as they are both stuck inside the dungeon. Mizuki then asks if they could communicate with the dragon. Keshi thinks they probably could. Mizuki confirms if she is serious. Keshi then explains that while the dragon is on a higher level of existence like her, it won't be a problem for a being whose superior existence talks with one of a smaller existence. Mizuki then asks what would be the best way to address him, as there are probably many ways to do so. She mentions there is no way he would listen to a lowly human like Mizuki. When Mizuki suggests that Keshi talk to the dragon, as she is superior to humans, she refuses, claiming that the dragon's magical power is vastly different, and she is a tiny, small, beautiful fairy who is weak and small. She then wonders why there is a dragon here in the first place. When Mizuki first entered the dungeon, he was not there. Mizuki remembers how there has never been any news about any adventure encountering dragons, even though they have been searching dungeons for quite a while. The only explanation for this is that none of them have survived. Keshi also finds it strange since dragons are usually found deeper in dungeons and adventurers rarely encounter them near the entrances. Mizuki asks her if she can think of any reason why the dragon would be here. Keshi speculates that the dragon might have been driven out by something larger and ended up staying here. Mizuki thinks he should talk to the dragon, but Keshi warns against it, saying she would never talk to a fly. She gives an analogy to prove her point. Mizuki would be surprised if the dragon did talk back. Still, he asks what might interest the dragon. Keshi judges his intelligence and Mizuki emphasizes how serious he is about talking to the dragon. Keshi thinks he's foolish for trying to negotiate with a dragon. Mizuki, however, is optimistic, believing that as a salesman, if he knows what the dragon really wants, he can negotiate. As Mizuki approaches the dragon, it roars, asserting its dominance. Mizuki respectfully asks him to wait. He bows in front of the dragon and mentions he wants to have a discussion with him about asset management. The dragon, confused but intrigued, listens. Mizuki introduces himself, explaining that he is from Kawa Securities and is a professional asset manager. The dragon, unimpressed, comments that he doesn't care who Mizuki is. Mizuki continues by saying that he is a professional in asset management and foundation, with significant experience in managing the valuable assets of many of his customers. He then states that this conversation isn't about him, but about properly managing the dragon's assets, the treasure that he protects as a dragon. He mentions that he can offer effective advice on safeguarding it and asks the dragon for his opinion. Keshi explained to him earlier. She asked if he had any idea why dragons live in caves. Mizuki mentioned he doesn't. She comments that she is sorry for his ignorance. She continues that the correct answer is to protect their treasure of splendid jewels, rare and valuable treasures. Dragons tend to keep their treasure in the depths of the dungeon, carefully hiding and protecting it in their cave. In other words, the one thing that interests dragons the most is their treasure. After hearing this, Mizuki is confident that he is good at managing property and believes that the best way to overcome this situation is with psychology. Keshi doesn't understand what the term means. The dragon, slightly more interested, asks Mizuki what asset management is. Mizuki explains that his job is to properly manage assets. The dragon confirms that he is not a thief trying to steal his treasure, and Mizuki confirms that was not his intention. The dragon then says how he is a small man, and it is hard for him to believe that a small man like him could offer any useful advice. Mizuki realizes that the dragon is indeed concerned about his treasure, and that he is being rejected without learning anything. He motivates himself, saying there are those who are smart and those who are actually smart, and feels there is room for persuasion. Mizuki continues by mentioning that there have been recent changes in the dungeon and asks if the dragon has encountered any trouble. The dragon looks angered by the implication. Mizuki continues that with his power he doesn't need to worry about anything. The dragon then says that Mizuki is mocking him, that he ran away from the depths of the labyrinth, and that he's a pitiful dragon sitting in such a shallow hole. Mizuki realizes he's hit a nerve and notices how huge the dragon is. Even though the surrounding space is affected by a small change in the dragon's emotions, he realizes that the dragon originally lived deep in the dungeons and moved so far because of some kind of threat. Mizuki assures the dragon that he is not mocking him. The dragon, however, becomes furious and mentions he will regret laughing at him. He threatens to bury Mizuki under ice for daring to laugh at him. Mizuki quickly defends himself, stating that as an asset management professional, he can be of great help, and emphasizes that if they kill him now, the dragon will lose his means to secure his property forever. He recalls a principle from behavioral economics. People prioritize avoiding losses over making gains. People fear the loss of what they have already gained above all else. In other words, it's easier to sell a product by emphasizing the disadvantage of not having it rather than the advantages of having it. He decides to give this a try. However, the dragon isn't swayed and begins to attack, commenting that he doesn't know the little one. Mizuki thinks his argument was not effective. Just as he's about to strike, Keshi steps in, begging the dragon to stop. She bows before the dragon, asking him to listen to what she has to say about this low-ranking vulgar fool. She explains how she tried to stop Mizuki. The dragon is confused. She requests to excuse her rudeness and forgive him, even though his race is inferior, but deep down he is probably good. She requests him to listen for a moment and promises to do anything. And if the dragon must kill someone, it should be her, leaving Mizuki alone. The dragon decides he has no choice then. They are both surprised that the dragon really agreed. He mentions how he doesn't really care and like the idea of ensuring the protection of his treasure. Mizuki and Keshi are relieved that the plan worked. They both make girly squeaks and say how this is called the high-speed Dugjaza effect. Mizuki then asks if the dragon wouldn't mind if they confirm the treasure's safety. The dragon agrees, allowing them to examine it. Keshi is thrilled to see the mountain of treasure and mentions how this is exactly what she expected from a dragon. Mizuki notices something peculiar among the items. The dragon, noticing his concern, asks what caught his eye. Mizuki points to an object and asks what it is. The dragon explains that if Mizuki is worried about it, he appreciates that Mizuki has a keen eye to notice it and mentions that it's a recent find, his new favorite. He picks up the object, mentioning how beautiful it is, the hard and smooth white material with glowing geometric patterns that change regularly. These complex spell cards can be inserted into it. Mizuki looks at the object and realizes it is a clock for recording attendance. He hands the card to the dragon and mentions how interesting it is when you insert it into the box. It engraves a symbol on it. Mizuki looks at the card, which is an attendance card of the Sonoda guy, and sees he is not working. The dragon then asks what the symbol means, as he is very curious about it. Keshi asks Mizuki if he knows about it. Mizuki smartly replies that his customer is lucky and he knows about this device. Mizuki then cleverly suggests that the clock will stop working if he keeps using it. The dragon is worried that his favorite device might stop working and is concerned that it needs magic power. He explains that this device requires a power source called a battery, and without it, the device won't last more than a month. The dragon, dismayed at the thought of losing his new favorite device so soon, and mentions how this was his dream treasure and he is unhappy as fate has played mischief with him. Mizuki calms him down, assuring him that he should leave it up to him, as it's his mission to protect his assets, and he can get replacement batteries from the outside world. Keshi is also happy that Mizuki knows what to do. The dragon is pleased when Mizuki offers to bring back replacement batteries from the outside world and thinks it's worthy to listen to what humans have to say. The dragon, now more trusting, allows Mizuki to leave the dungeon to get the batteries, asking him to ensure the clock continues to function. The dragon mentions that Mizuki owes him one, as he took something from his treasure chest, the chest that contained the skill book. Keshi is disappointed in him for not mentioning the skill book and for opening a dragon's treasure without permission. The dragon mentions that he is willing to disregard it for the time being and asks Mizuki to consider it as a prepayment for his services and to return with as many batteries as he can. As they are exiting the dungeon, Dragon asks what the white box is for, and Mizuki explains that it is a device for managing time. The dragon is happy that the device manages time and considers it a noble treasure. As they leave the dungeon, Mizuki is relieved to have survived, and Keshi is bewildered by the outside world and is amazed to see where they are. As Mizuki notices a police car around, he is worried because he did the dungeon without a license and could get arrested. He decides to go to his rental house. Keshi is confused about what they were running from this time. Mizuki grabs her and hides her, saying that getting caught here will be worse than skewers and salt. She is afraid to hear this. She is curious about everything and asks if they are on Chikyu, Ingrasal continent, the Holy Garm Empire, or in the mysterious forest where elves live. Mizuki confirms that it's none of those. He offers her a cup of instant noodles and explains how to prepare them with hot water, which will make them edible. Keshi, still confused by her surroundings, wonders where her forest home disappeared to. Mizuki mentions that she was in a completely different world before. She notes that no matter where she went, there were iron boxes on wheels everywhere, and she doesn't know this great tiny world. Listening to this, Mizuki thinks that he no longer has any doubts. These are actually connected to another world. She then asks about the skill Mizuki took from the dragon. He shows her the skill book with the fire skill, and she criticizes him for having such a poor skill set. Mizuki explains that in this world, people don't have skills like hers, and she looks at the skill book, pondering how dangerous it might be. Keshi looks at the skill book and mentions that it makes things very dangerous. She notes how Mr. Zuki has lived without any skills until now, but he helped her with the fire skill, which is a card in this skill book. She points out all the empty slots in the book and wonders if it's possible for him to save his skills as cards. Once he puts his skills into card form, he can activate those skills directly from the card and even pass the skills to others. Mizuki is not impressed and thinks that if this is all he gets from the skill book. She explains how he can activate cards freely, regardless of skill or level requirements. Even elite skills that require ultra-high levels can be used as he likes. She is very happy, as it is rare to find such an amazing skill. Normally, all skills have level requirements. If you don't have the required level, the skill may not be usable. Fire is a very popular skill for beginners since it requires a low level and can only be obtained by diving into dungeons. However, one needs versatile combat skills to dive into dungeons effectively. Mizuki literally listens to all this and says that it sounds like a big deal. He thinks about how much money he could make if he sold his skill book. Keshi is annoyed by this idea and thinks it's wasteful to sell skill books, but he is adamant, believing that buying and selling skills is a big business right now. She is offended and thinks that humans are vulgar for doing that to such a rare skill. Mizuki thinks it's worth $1 billion, and he's not planning to sell it right away. Maybe he can sell it in the future. He then thinks he should get food and call the office to find out if they know he's living in a cheap apartment with no security. He could surely be attacked. They both head out and call the head office. He explains his situation, that he reached the building and it was turned into a dungeon. The people at the head office recommend that he should just wait at home, but he has other plans. On the call, he explains that he is going to leave the company because in his last job at the company, he was harassed by his branch manager, so instead of transferring again, he'll take this opportunity and just quit. He hangs up the phone and thinks it was extremely refreshing to do so. We are taken to the past, where Mizuki is having a conversation with his old boss. The old boss is threatening Mizuki, telling him to better get going to his new job as he has been accused of embezzlement. This was not at all true. As a result, he is now being transferred, and his boss insists that Mizuki needs to go to his new company and talk to his new boss. He leaves, saying he doesn't mind, but the case of 300 million yen will not go away just by making him leave the company. Mizuki is refreshed as he cuts the call. After the call ends, Keshi confirms that Myth has quit his job at Koa Group and asks him if he will be okay leaving his job since she is relying on him for food for a while. He mentions that he'll manage as he has savings and has a skill that is sure to be valued. As they are having this conversation, the little fairy sees a burger joint and is mesmerized by its large logo. Mizuki, to hide this mysterious fairy from the world, hides her in her backpack. As they enter the burger joint, the door opens automatically. Seeing this, she is surprised and thinks that this is some kind of magic or power. Mizuki exclaims that it's just an automatic door and she should not make such loud noises from inside the backpack. She explains that her voice can only be heard by him. He is surprised by this and then asks her how she knows Japanese. She explains that it's like telepathy. Fairies don't communicate physically like humans do. It's just that Mr. Zuki has it in his native language. The person in front of them in the line gives Mizuki weird looks as he has been talking to himself all this time. Seeing these looks, he pulls out his cell phone and pretends that he is on a call. On hearing the word telepathy, he explains that it means she has a direct line to his thoughts. She teases him, saying yes, she can hear him just fine and knows every thought that passes through his mind, including erotic thoughts. She explains that if she wanted to, she could hear those thoughts. Embarrassed, Mizuki asks her to share whenever he is thinking about something erotic or inappropriate, so that she doesn't read his mind at that time without his permission. She teases him more by saying that she knew he was looking at her bottom when they first met. He is embarrassed by this and says that next time he does so, he will inform her in advance so she doesn't hear his thoughts. As they are having this conversation, it's their turn to order. In front of them are two strange-looking people who are trying to pay at the counter. The employee at the counter is trying to explain to him that he needs to pay 2,000 yen, but he is unable to understand her language and realizes it is related to money. He takes out gold coins from his pocket and offers them to take as much as they want. The employee is shocked by the coins and says it would be a problem and that payment must be in Japanese yen. The person insists that gold coins are acceptable and 10 of them should be more than enough. This turns into an argument between the employee asking for money and them not being able to provide it, just gold coins. Mizuki excuses them, and as they heard the voice, they introduces themselves as Heath and Matilda. Heath asks him if he could lend him some money. He pays for their meals, and they sit together to eat at the fast food joint. As they eat their burgers, Heath finds it a little messy, but with a strong taste. He likes it but doesn't like pickles. Matilda thinks pickles add a nice accent. Mizuki is confused by who these people are as they seem like foreigners with cosplay outfits. He asks if they are on a trip, and they reply that it could be considered a trip. Still, Mizuki is confused and asks why they chose such a remote place for their vacation. They further inquire if this place is a kingdom or an empire, as the technology seems very advanced. Mizuki explains that this is a city in the country called Japan, specifically the rural countryside of Japan. They then ask who the greatest person in the country is, and Mizuki explains it is the Prime Minister, who lives in the Capitol building of the Prime Minister's office in Nagatacho. Heath is intrigued knowing about the Prime Minister. As they move towards the French fries, Matilda mentions that the potatoes are very salty and tasty, and this world is good as they enjoy their meal. Mizuki is still waiting for his order. An employee from the counter calls their name, and he grabs the food, wishing his newly formed acquaintances a good trip as they leave. They stops him, saying that since he helped them out, they also wanted to thank him. He then takes out his status, and Mizuki sees it, and asks him to pull out his status as well. The people around them start turning their ears towards him, listening to the words status and adventure as he shows his status to Heath. Heath looks at the skills in his skill book and decides to give one of those skills to Mizuki, saying it's a pretty useful skill. He confirms if it's okay to give the skill and says it's nothing. He can have it. As they leave, they thank him again for the money and ask if they could borrow some more. Mizuki lends him more money. As they reach home, Mizuki turns to Keshi and wonders who that person was, thinking it's suspicious that she has been quiet for some time. He asks if she is feeling unwell. She explains that the earlier guy was a little scary. But anyway, she asks him what skill he received. The skill is called chip damage, and as he sorts through the internet for this skill, he discovers it is worth 200,000 yen. Keshi does not understand the currency, so he simplifies it for her by saying that one could buy about 200,000 of those burgers with this amount of money. As they read the description of the skill online, it mentions that a level 25 is required. Keshi thinks that the skill has much more value than what is written on the internet. Many monsters with armor of physical resistance have sharply increased in recent years because they are so few in circulation, and it can go up to 100 billion. Some skills can be used in combos that are more effective depending on the combination. It seems that the fixed damage form from the skill can be the center of such combos, although it wouldn't be decisive by itself. When combined with other skills, the damage adds up explosively. It is highly evaluated for its ease of use, and for the fact that even monsters with special resistance cannot stop it. What it requires level 25 and he is only at level 10. He shares this with Keshi, but she reminds him that he has the skill book, so he can ignore the level requirement and use it anyway. As he places the card in the skill book, it mentions that there is one uncovered skill and asks if they would like to convert it to a card. Keshi says they should consider it, but he thinks that once it's converted into a card, he would never be able to undo it. He wonders if it's a good idea to make it a card instead of keeping it as 20 million yen. Keshi explains that his skill book is very valuable and that this alone isn't enough in case of emergencies. He thinks that if he had 20 million yen, he could do a lot of other things. As he looks at his skill book, he finds a column next to the fire card he already has in the book. The card on one side has a line of dots, and at this moment, only one of the black dots is filled. He assumes that this might indicate the number of times this skill can be used. Keshi agrees that it could mean he has a total of 10 uses of the card and has used it once so far. He thinks to himself that it must be a powerful skill and wonders how a constant activation skill like chip damage would interact with the fire skill. They are interrupted by a knock on the door. Mizuki suggests that Keshi should hide as they don't know who is behind the door, since he has just moved here and knows no one in the neighborhood. He wonders if it might be someone from work. As he peeps through the peephole, he sees a kid. He thinks maybe she got the wrong apartment, planning to send her away since it is late. But then another thought comes to mind. Maybe she is a honey trap, and when he opens the door, a bunch of strong men will appear to attack him, having somehow learned about his skill or Keshi. As he opens the door, the girl enters and introduces herself as Himikawa Shinobu of Shinobu's channel. He is shocked and confused by the sudden entry of the stranger into his apartment. Shinobu apologizes for suddenly showing up at his place. Mizuki is confused who she is and why she was intruding in his house. As Mizuki asks her all this, she suddenly takes out her selfie stick and phone and starts recording. She began talking in a very bubbly, happy voice to her followers, sharing with them this is the start of the dungeon capture plan and how she was right now in the home of an active adventurer. She then stops recording, sharing with Mizuki that she now has 2 opening shots that she can eat it. Mizuki notices how her personality has shifted suddenly as soon as she stopped recording. As the both sit on the couch, she begins asking questions about if he was or was not an adventurer. He shares that she has got some wrong information, and in fact he's not an adventurer at all. She shared how she thought he was an adventurer, and that's why followed him to his house. Mizuki realizes she must have overheard his conversation in the hamburger shop. He then asked her, what was she looking for? She explains that she has a YouTube channel where she makes videos. To display the number of followers, she took out her laptop and showed him the numbers. Mizuki is least interested and says that he has no interest in seeing the number of subscribers she has. She then lets out a sigh and says that's what she doesn't get about adults, that they don't realize how big the number of people is with 30,000 subscribers on YouTube. She can earn as much as a salary as the monthly income of a salesman. Irritated by all this unrequited information by a kid, Mizuki looks miserable, but she goes on that with the new dungeon that has been created yesterday, an explanation video would generate new subscribers, and that is why she was looking for an adventurer. A new exploration video would absolutely get hits. Mizuki interrupts her by saying he understood and then asks her if she qualifies as an adventurer. He explains how he has just applied. Qualifying to be an adventurer used to be very strict. It was like trying to be an astronaut, but the current system has made it easier to qualify. Certain standards are in place to avoid risk. But many folks will bet their lives for a chance to get rich. He is still an office worker, but he's actually unemployed. She then charges towards him and asks if he will take him inside the engine when she officially becomes an adventurer. But Mizuki does not like that idea. He shares how he doesn't want to be popular on YouTube, and she has mistaken that all of mankind is dreaming to be on YouTube. She gave him an offer that she will make him a semi-regular on Shinobu's channel, but Mizuki really doesn't want that. He then asked her to go home as she left. She hands him a piece of paper with her YouTube channel and social accounts and asks him to contact her if he changes his mind. The next morning, when he plays a video of Shinobu's channel, she talks about her best buys this month in her video. Mizuki has his adventure qualification interview that day and decided he should get going. Keshi wants him to pick up a copy of a famous comedy series from a video shop. Mizuki instructs her to get caught and commended how she is obsessed with the show. As he reaches the adventure consultation service, the person there asks him about when did he get the status. He explained that he got a day before yesterday as he was transferred to a place that became a dungeon. The interviewer understood that Kawa Securities was the place he was talking about. He did ask him to show his bank passbook as he looked at his bank account. He mentioned how he earned a lot as a security man. Mizuki mentioned he did, but he had to bear the workplace bullying on a daily basis. As an interview gets over and he gets in his car and he reaches back home. As he sees Shinobu sitting on the side of the road near his home, he stops the car. It looks like she has not slept for hours. She looks at him and says what a surprise she met him here. But Mizuki is not at all surprised and knows that there is something wrong. He asks her for how much time was she waiting out here for him. She says that she was just passing by and waited for a bit and thought that he wouldn't come. She then asked her about his interview for research. He shared that as there are not much professional adventure in the city because the dungeon only recently arrived here, so he'll probably get through the interview. Hearing this, Shinobu is content that she can rely on him for entering the dungeons while doing, so she points a finger at him, which is considered rude. Mizuki asks her to stop pointing her finger and interrogates her as to why she was not in school. She shares that she has not been much there in school as she is making money on YouTube through her channel. He is disappointed and says that this is a bad idea, and she should have continued school. She then goes on and gives him a proposal that if he takes her to the dungeon, she will let him make a pass at her. He gets out of the car and explains to her that this was not good manners. She doesn't stop there and goes on persuading him that she can also share some inappropriate pictures with him. He was annoyed and asked her, why was she so desperate and was pushing so hard? She explained that she is betting on YouTube and this is her big chance to succeed. The buzz generated from exploring a new dungeon will make her a famous YouTuber. He goes on explaining to her that she should first graduate from high school and then maybe go to college and then decide what she wants to do, but she argues that school is stupid and it's the same everywhere. He then walks away towards his car and asks her to not follow him again, but she has still not quit. She started to persuade him by undressing herself. Mizuki is shocked at the desperation that this girl has and called the insane for doing, so he asked her to go back to school and learn about manners while Shinobu, seeing her attempt fail, gives him a curse that she will never find a woman in her life and calls him a stupid low-key middle-aged man. She also shouts at him that he's going to regret not helping the future national YouTuber, and if he will not help her, she will herself go to the dungeon. Ignoring all this, he climbed his stairs and entered his apartment where Keshi welcomed her and asked him about his interview and did he qualify. She also asked about if he got her the DVD she asked for he shares that he did, and an interview also went. She thanked him for the DVD and gave him a suggestion to watch the series together while having cookies as she plays in the DVD. He subtly comments how he is happy that Kishi is wearing clothes. She looks concerned as this praise was like he just died or something. She asked Mizuki what was his plan after he gets his qualification. He shared that how he has to first give the batteries to Dragon Keshi things that she doesn't really want to see him again. But Mizuki thinks that as he gave him a rare fire skill, and besides the promise that he would bring him batteries, they would definitely go back to the dragon. But they were not in a hurry and they can do it later. Probably when he looks into the skill adventure a little more, and once it is safe, he can sell everything and return to being a trader. As for now, he'll just study more and prepare and then dive into the dungeon again as they're having this conversation or notification pops up on his phone that shares that Shinobu is live from her channel. As they open the live, they saw her walking into the dungeon. She talks to her subscribers as she enters a dungeon telling them that she has got permission to shoot and she would appreciate everybody giving her money and asking questions. Mizuki knows very well she doesn't have any permission, and a lot of it also mentions how high schoolers are not allowed and people saying that she'll die in the dungeon. Mizuki, watching the video, knows that she has made a mistake and what a stupid girl she is. She then shows that she is entering dungeon and being signed in dungeon makes her really nervous as she read some of the comments that are saying that she is a criminal doing that and it is unauthorized to enter a dungeon like this. She thinks that all these are just noisy, hated, and haters are good for eating as she goes deeper. The signals from the video were now static. The video is not at all clear, but her shrieky voice wanting help can be heard. Hearing this, Mizuki runs towards the door and decides to go and save her. Keshi is concerned if they were going to make it in time, but they don't have a choice. They have to make it in time as he enters his car and rushes towards the dungeon. He asked Keshi to keep looking at the stream, but right now the screen is blank, and there is nothing screen streaming as they move a little far she's live again, and it can be seen that she is being dragged by Goblin deeper into the dungeon. Mizuki first thinks that she has escaped, but he is wrong. The radio waves behave differently inside the dungeon, and maybe it got some network and started screaming again. As it reaches the dungeon on the entrance, the goblins are dragging her in the video. The dungeon is a twisted space, and he asked if Keshi can locate her. She's trying to do her best and locate where she was when he asked her to see in the screen. She shared that the video is now prohibited to those under 18 and they expect that something bad has happened as they rush towards her. The goblin has the selfie camera, and they are misbehaving with Shinobu and removing her top as he reached there. He asked the goblin to stop and is a mess and crying in the corner. While this is all still streaming on YouTube as he takes out the fire skill card from the skill book and attacks them, but the first attack doesn't do much harm to them. He then takes the card and attacks them with fire the second time. The fire attack didn't work on the goblin, leaving Mizuki confused. Why did it not work as he used the same card again, yet the attack failed? As he tried to defend himself, he kicked the goblin away and opened the skill book. It displayed a notification saying invalid operation and instructed him to reload the card holder and try again. Mizuki realized he needed to place the card back into its slot each time before an attack could be executed. He needed some time to put the card back in its place on the screen. Meanwhile, the goblin continued attacking Shinobu, ripping her clothes apart. Keshi guided Mizuki to stay calm and try again, reminding him to properly place the card in the slot in the skill book and reload it. This time, the card activated and a fire attack was successfully executed on the goblin. One of the goblins that was hit by the fire attack charged toward Mizuki with full force. Keshi defended him, and as the monster was distracted, Mizuki, with shaky hands, placed the card back in the skill book and reloaded it to attack the monster. However, as he was doing this, Shinobu approached the scary goblin from behind and struck him with a spear in her back. As the goblin fell to the ground, she commanded Mizuki to perform another fire attack. Once all the goblins were defeated, Mizuki asked her to get up as he will take her to his home. She agreed, and as they were going back with the car, Shinobu asked him why he had helped her. He explained that he just wanted to help a reckless kid playing with fire and that she should learn a valuable lesson from this situation, apologize, and return to school. She then asked for his phone number. Mizuki provided his number, and he drove her to her parents' house. As he drops her to her house, her parents thanked him for saving her. While sitting in a parked car, Keshi asked Mizuki if he was tired. He explained that he had a lot on his mind. When he returned to his apartment, he noticed that Heath and Matilda were entering a house next to his flat. Mizuki inquired why they were here. They explained that they were temporarily living here and that they were now neighbors. Heath mentioned that he needed to return the favor for the money he had borrowed. Mizuki insisted that he didn't need to, but both Heath and Matilda appreciated him and mentioned that his money had helped them significantly. Heath offered that if they ever had trouble, they could let him know, and he would help them in time, even if it meant going against the world. The next morning, Mizuki switched on the TV and saw news about strict actions being taken to prevent unauthorized entrances into dungeons. The news also highlighted the dangerous side of the internet, with all comments on Shinobu's YouTube channel criticizing her for entering the cave alone. Everyone thought Mizuki was a hero, and he had quickly become a celebrity. After leaving Shinobu at her parents' house, he met her parents again and went to the police. None of the other details were made public, only details from the live stream were made public, but Shinobu was suspended from school and was facing severe backlash online. She posted an apology video that slightly calmed things down. Mizuki was concerned about the news when Keshi asked him what was on his mind. Mizuki explained that it would be a hassle once people figured out who he was, living in a simple apartment. They could easily break in. Keshi thought she was strong enough to stop them, but Mizuki worried that if she did, she would end up in a research lab. They both hoped to avoid this situation. Suddenly, someone knocked at the door. Mizuki wondered if the doorbell was not working. It was Heath. He entered and apologized for bothering Mizuki again. He explained that he had bought a computer but couldn't figure out how to use it and asked if Mizuki could help. Matilda explained that the merchant had told them it came with an easy startup package, but Heath had overestimated his capabilities and was now struggling with the computer. When Mizuki entered their apartment, he saw the computer lying on the floor, which was unusual since they didn't have a table or desk. When he asked about the table, they said they would buy one tomorrow if needed. He got in an awkward position and started working. Mizuki then set up the computer. After he finished, they both started clapping for him and thanked him profusely, calling him a great computer teacher. He thanked him again and said he would give Mizuki another skill, as the previous one was not enough. Mizuki mentioned that the previous skill was more than sufficient and asked if Heath was an adventurer. Heath explained that he was not an adventurer but an exile. When Mizuki returned to his house, he had a conversation with Keshi about how he felt like an old man setting up the computer, but he didn't let him teach him. Heath mentioned that he would learn as he used it. Mizuki then checked his laptop and saw an email from Horimiya at Kihiro. Keshi asked who he was, and Mizuki explained that Horimiya was a businessman, president, and CEO of the Horimiya Group, as well as the largest shareholder. The email stated that it was nice meeting Mizuki, and that Horimiya had learned about him helping the girl in the YouTube live session. He mentioned that the skill Mizuki used was unknown and not in the database, which made Mizuki a mysterious person in the adventurer world. Horimiya was fascinated by Mizuki's powers and irregular existence and wanted to hire him for a special job. He also noted that Mizuki didn't have to worry about his skills being taken from him, as there were indirect means to ensure he worked for Horimiya. Horimiya would prefer Mizuki consider the matter himself rather than being forced into it. Mizuki, sweating and realizing his identity had been discovered, knew he had no choice but to address the situation. He called the number provided in the email. When Horimiya answered, he appreciated Mizuki's quick response and asked to meet for a face-to-face conversation, preferring dinner over a phone call. Mizuki explained that he lived far and couldn't make it for dinner. Harumiya understood and arrived to pick him up. Mizuki went to his balcony and saw a luxurious car with a well-dressed man waiting downstairs. Confused but with no choice, Mizuki went down, entered the car, and was driven to an opulent restaurant. As they sat across from each other, Mr. Harumiya reassured Mizuki that the restaurant was safe. He explained that the chef was an old friend who used to run a top restaurant in Tokyo. Harumiya then laid out the offer, 10 million upfront and another 400 million if the mission was successful. The task was to retrieve a divine rank magic item, a potion that restored all HP, MP, and state abnormalities. It was the rarest resource in the world and had only been found once before by General Wallace Chandler, a U.S. Marine officer. The potion had cured a researcher's cancer, showcasing its remarkable properties. Harumiya explained that he wasn't unhealthy himself, but wanted the potion to alleviate future anxieties and ensure the future of his group. He emphasized that the mission was to protect the group's future and was not personal. Mizuki replied that he understood but mentioned he is just a beginner and is not confident going into the dungeon depths. Harumiya clarified that he wasn't asking Mizuki to explore the dungeon alone, but to accompany other adventurers he had hired as a navigator. The traditional methods had proven useless, and Harumiya believed Mizuki's unique abilities made him ideal for the task. Mizuki would be part of a top adventuring party known as REA, Royal Executive Arms, to capture the newly unexplored dungeon with them. The group of adventurers called the REA work with their leader, who introduces herself as Carol and shares that she serves as the captain of the REA. She asks, looking at Mizuki, if he is Mizuki Ryosuke. He confirms that he is indeed Mizuki, and then inquires how she can speak Japanese. Carol explains that she is using an auto-translate skill, which might be unfamiliar to him but is quite common in business. Mizuki looks at the adventurer group and notices that this young girl is surrounded by 3 men. He confirms with her, the captain of the group, and she agrees, replying with an attitude if he has a problem with it. She emphasizes that being underestimated simply because she's a woman is not acceptable. Successfully clearing a dungeon depends on the level of skills, equipment, and the experience of the party members. Mizuki feels ashamed by the statement and apologizes. She then asks if he would guide them through the dungeon. Harumiya intervenes, noting that he is yet to hear Mizuki agree, and adds that he needs to understand that if his identity and rare skill were to become public knowledge, it could be a problem for him. With this, Harumiya hands Mizuki a piece of paper to sign the contract. Mizuki signs it and then heads back home. When he returns, Keshi asks if everything went okay. Mizuki replies that in the bigger picture, it didn't, but otherwise, he is okay. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. Shinobu comes to thank him for the other day. He is pleased and remarks that she is beginning to understand the concept of manners. She hands him a bag full of snacks, which he accepts and thanks her for as he was running out of them. She apologizes for everything that happened in the dungeon. Mizuki asks how she is feeling. She shares that she has been a mess but is getting through it, surprisingly well. He adds that she is not in danger of dying, and this might be a good lesson for her. She then goes down and thanks him for saving her, getting a little awkward, and asks if he will go out with her. He thinks this is a prank and asks where the hidden camera is. She explains that this is not a prank and says that his remark is hurting her feelings. He then closes the door, saying that he doesn't want to be a criminal. She tries to go inside and asks him to reconsider, as it is not against the law to have a non-sexual, pure relationship with marriage in mind. He asks her what in the world makes her want to date him. She explains that he has a lot more going on in his life than an average person. From the crack of the door, she stares at Mizuki with puppy eyes and again proposes that they should date. He understands that she might be a bit loopy after everything that has happened and tries to push her away from the door to close it. But she is persistent, arguing that once they start dating, they could discuss all their preferences and avoid disappointment. He mentions that he has already told her this is not possible and pushes her head out of the door while she pulls in. She shares that she's totally in love with him right now, her heart beating super fast. She finally leaves, saying that if he ever becomes an adventurer, they should go out. Mizuki finally manages to close the door. Keshi remarks that she is surely weird while eating the snacks she bought, and Mizuki is confused about what is happening today. His phone suddenly starts to ring. When he answers, the voice on the other side asks who he was. He replies that nobody but him uses this phone. The voice then mentions that she is Carol and wants him to come to her hotel room tomorrow. Mizuki is very frustrated by the end of the day and just wants a break. The next day, when he visits the hotel Carol mentioned, he knocks on the door. As he enters with Carol's approval, she asks him to wait a minute. She then removes her helmet, gloves, and fighting costume, flits her hair, and asks if she kept him waiting long. She then inquires if he is not feeling well. He replies that it has been a long day and asks what she wants to discuss with him. Is there something about the dungeon she wants to ask? Carol replies that it is actually him she wanted to check. She reaches his mouth and tries squeezing his chin. Mizuki is confused about what she is trying to do. She asks him to stop struggling. Carol then touches his chest and arms, commenting on his martial arts experience. Mizuki is puzzled and asks what she means. She mentions that his stats suggested the same. Carol then asks him to sit on the bed and stay still. Mizuki is confused and says he would be more comfortable if she just asked him questions, but she stops him, saying she would rather not deal with being lied to. She asks him to stay still and look into her eyes without looking away. Using her unusual scale eyes, she looks deep into Mizuki's eyes and then asks him to leave for today. Mizuki is confused and asks what this was about. Carol explains that she used her skill to obtain the information she needed. He is appalled that she first brought him here and then, without any explanation, started to probe him like he was some toy and then threw him out when she was done. Mizuki, very annoyed, asks her to be quiet. Carol then says that to build trust between them, they should agree to exchange information and asks if he objects. Mizuki agrees. Carol is puzzled and asks why he told her to shut up. Mizuki covers up his anger by saying he didn't say it, and her auto-translate might have malfunctioned. He then asks why he screamed at her. Mizuki explains that he was just reacting to her great idea, but he tried to get out of the situation by blaming the translation skill. Carol then explains that she used her skill known as Scale Eyes, an analysis skill, to see all his stats. This skill helps analyze targets and armor to determine weak points, forming a perfect plan to handle them. She further mentions that she also uses a variety of close combat, physical damage, and sports skills in battle. Carol shows him her helmet, known as the Albert helmet, which received a bonus called Full Dress for having the complete set. Mizuki thinks to himself that it is a practical set rather than a cosplay outfit. He adds that he would have appreciated if she had told him everything beforehand. She asks him to keep all the information confidential and apologizes for making him uncomfortable by touching him all over. She then asks him about the skill book and what it does. Mizuki explains that there is a lot he doesn't know about himself. Carol adds that it allows him to ignore required skill levels. Mizuki confirms that's the case, but he doesn't have many skills and doesn't want to waste charges testing them out. Carol finds the skill interesting and notes that its effects could change depending on how he uses it. Mizuki thinks he might have been half intimidated into joining the elite adventurer party, but he is happy to test his skill book in a real situation. He might even be able to sell the skill through REA, depending on how things work out. Carol then mentions that at present, she doesn't think he would be much of an asset in a fight compared to them. Mizuki agrees. Therefore, they want to leave the fighting to them and focus on guiding them through the dungeon as originally planned. Mizuki agrees, and Carol shows him the door, telling him she'll see him later. She assures him that this will be a simple mission to stay around dungeon and follows them. Mizuki agrees, noting they are the strongest party of adventurers in Britain. He says he will do his best and learn everything he can from them. They shake hands as Carol reminds him not to let down the REA, as they are counting on him. The next day, Carol and Mizuki meet again for target practice, but he can't hit a single shot. Carol thinks he shouldn't worry much about this, as if the situation arises where he needs to shoot, it means everybody else is dead. The REA assault team is armed with shotguns and assault rifles. Carol assures him he'll be fine. When Mizuki asks Carol about her weapon, she shows him her sword and shares that it is her only emergency weapon. He then points to his vest and asks if a stab-proof vest would be okay. Carol replies that of course it wouldn't, so the vest is just a comfort. A military person comes and asks the members to confirm the armaments they will be taking for their scheduled dungeon clearing. Carol said that the government manages all their weaponry taken into the dungeon. They can't let power wander in the streets fully armed. When asked about her sword, Carol replies that it is not loaded. Later, when Mizuki is trying to fit the bullets into his gun, another army person helps him, as it is his first time handling a gun. He explains that there is a bit of a trick to loading the gun and confirms that Mizuki is a right-handed person. Mizuki agrees and is advised to put the spare rounds on the other side. Mizuki thanks the person and asks for his name. He shares that he is the 11th Brigade Major Himata. Later, Mizuki takes Carol to a corner as he wants to speak with her alone about something. He then passes her a tablet with a shareholder report. The report mentions some information about Horiyama, As she reads it, Carol asks him to stop as she doesn't understand what he is trying to implement with this information. She shares that she knows a lot about clearing dungeons, but being only 16 years old, she asks him to break it down to be a little easier to understand. Mizuki explains that the report points out where he is putting all his money and how he is borrowing funds recklessly. Carol shares that he should have more than enough money and doesn't understand why he is borrowing money. Mizuki explains that he started borrowing around the time he entered the dungeon clearing business and began spending more than he could financially handle, even hiring adventurers like them to explore for him. This could be due to some serious illness or an unforeseen complication. After sharing this information, he hands her a bowl of ramen, but she is confused about how to eat it. Later, the day of the dungeon clearing finally arrives. Mr. Hamada wishes them good luck and shares how he's counting on them. Carol firmly replies that he doesn't need to worry about them, but keeps in mind that they may clear the whole dungeon and still not find the item he's searching for. He acknowledges that this could happen, but still believes they will find it. Mitsuki thinks to himself that he honestly doesn't know where to go in the dungeon, as the last time he was there, it was still shifting and changing. He then closes his mind and tries to establish telepathic contact with Keshi. He closes his eyes and asks her if she can hear him. She replies that she can hear him loud and clear. Mizuki leaves the direction up to Kishi and promises to buy her a box set of DVDs on Thursday if all goes as planned. She is happy to hear this and agrees that they should watch it together. Mr. Hamada says that he must simply find the treasure he's looking for, as this might be his last chance. Mizuki is concerned about him mentioning a last chance and then enters the dungeon. They first encounter goblins, which they can't defend themselves against. Carol asks Mizuki what he thinks about the dungeon clearing and how it seems more like special forces rather than adventurers. She asks how they get to the deeper levels. As she asks him for the information, Mizuki telepathically asks Keshi which way to go. She replies that the deeper levels are right over there, but he isn't able to see her. Carol asks the fairy to be more specific, noticing Mizuki's confused expression. Carol is concerned and asks what is wrong. Mizuki thinks hard about it while trying to telepathically talk to her. Carol explains that a flood of her location sense is causing the delay. She then tells him he needs to take a right at the intersection. Carol asks if he is nervous. He replies that's why he isn't able to give proper directions, as he isn't used to everything in his mind, and thinks he is obviously not used to receiving telepathic orders from a fairy. He guides them through the entire cave. As they reach the staircase leading down to the depths, the REA is impressed that they haven't taken a single wrong turn and didn't encounter any large creatures. Everyone appreciates Mizuki for his great navigation skills, noting that he also accounted for the dungeon changing shape. Carol is also impressed and shares that she has made a decision and wants him to join them at the REA and be hired as a regular guide. All the other members are also happy, as the boss has taken a real liking to him. They also mention that they will give him a great party as he has joined them. As they are celebrating and having this conversation, they suddenly hear a roar from downstairs, indicating that something significant and possibly dangerous is about to happen. As they hear the roar coming from downstairs, the party gets into position to attack. A large, scary-looking monster with thorns on its head and a big stone baton in its hand appears. This is Mizuki's first time seeing an ogre. These creatures have a thing for human meat. The other members of the party tell him that, like most monsters in the depths, the ogres also have physical armor. They usually have a 4-point armor, and if the party relied solely on firearms, they'd go broke paying for ammo before they could kill the creature. But they have Carol. She is the boss of the REA. As she stands in front of the monster, Mizuki observes that she isn't moving. One of the members explains that she is using her scale eyes to analyze the ogre and figure out its statistics. As the monster attacks, Carol strikes back with her sword and uses the data she acquired from the stats to choose an appropriate strategy. Seeing her attack, the members appreciate their boss's counter skill and commend how impressive it was. Mizuki is shocked by the attack and thinks that the word awesome doesn't do justice to how great she is. As the monster falls to the ground, one of the members claims that they are going to be the best adventurers in the world and will take over V-Team from the US in no time. Carol is level 40 at the age of 16. Another member adds that she is still growing and will become even more powerful as she comes of age. Mizuki then asks one of the members how she became so strong. The member explains that 3 years ago in the United Kingdom, Carol was staying with her family when a dungeon suddenly appeared, causing the buildings to collapse. When she woke up, she was surrounded by rubble. An adventurer helped her up, and when she asked about her mom and dad, he explained that they were likely in the depths of the dungeon, and she had probably gotten separated from them in the fall. The adventurers were trying their best to fight the monsters and protect themselves and the small girl, but they were running out of ammo, and their skills were useless against the big monster. As one of the adventurers was on his deathbed, he gave her all his powers and asked her to run as far as she could. Even if she was the only one to survive, he gave her all his parts and gear so that the concentrated strength of all the adventurers would at least guarantee her survival. As she tried to run away, she was saved by Wallace Chandler in London. She was the only survivor, and that's how she became strong. Carol appreciates Mizuki for helping them clear the place much faster than anticipated due to his accurate navigation. The initial plan was to finish surveying the depths, but that goal is already accomplished, so they want to move on to locating and defeating the boss creature and going as far as they can in the dungeon. Mizuki telepathically asks if the worst creature will be like the dragon they faced before. She replies that if it were a dragon, they'd probably be dead, so whatever they encounter will be weaker than a dragon. Mizuki confirms this, and she explains that the reason the dragon was on the upper level is that something chased up there. Maybe all the monsters in the area are closer to the surface, so a strong monster could show up unexpectedly, just like the ogre did. Casey could sense where the boss was and helps them with directions. Suddenly, she shares that the signals she was receiving have cut off, and a wall with a dead end appears in front of them. Mizuki's phone starts ringing, surprising everyone at the REA as he is getting signals on his phone. Suddenly, a light from behind the wall emerges, and Carol defends everyone with her shield. Then a lightning attack strikes. Casey exclaims for Mizuki to get down. All the members of the REA also get down, but one of them gets struck by lightning. Carol is in front, protecting everyone, when a large black shadow appears, a big monster with lightning. Keisha exclaims that this monster is the boss ogre, an electric variant. She is now deeply worried that if a super-level variant like this is wandering around, her earlier concerns are definitely true. Mizuki asks what she was correct about. She explains that, like with the dragon, the dungeon's whole difficulty level might be skewed. All the monsters that are supposed to be in the depths are now on the upper levels. It's as if all the upper-level bosses have lost their places and are just wandering around. It's the worst, like starting a game and facing the final boss in the tutorial village, then finding all his elites in the grass. As Mizuki lies on the floor, Carol moves forward to attack the boss-level monster and asks Mizuki to remember its stats: 20 physical armor, 30 magic armor, and 15 HP. As she advances toward the monster, she guides Mizuki to remember this crucial information and communicate it to those on the outside. She attacks through the electric currents, piercing the tough armor with her skills, using duplication, crashing blows, and goblin soil to inflict as much damage as possible. But in the end, the monster traps her in one of the electric waves and grabs her by the helmet. Mizuki, from the ground, sees Carol struggling, so he aims his gun at the monster. Keisha tries to stop him, noting that he doesn't have a plan and is facing something much stronger than himself. Mizuki is confused as to why the monster is only attacking Carol. Keisha explains that the variant detects things around it differently and only reacts to moving objects. The electrical waves act like a radar to it, similar to how electromagnetic waves detect things from far away. That would also explain the phone signal. The monster then attacks Carol by ripping her clothing off. Mizuki decides to attack. Keisha explains that the monster's armor is so strong that his attack won't make it through. Only Blaze can deal 4-level damage. Mizuki is confident and determined to save Carol. He mentions he has a chip damage scale from Keith that deals 1 point of true damage to a target. If he activates that with the skill book, he can take down the ogre with a single hit. Keisha knows that for him to defeat the ogre, he must hit it at least 15 times and widely attack it. The ogre won't stay in one place and will retaliate with one powerful blow. Mizuki understands he can't land multiple hits but wonders if attacking it once might work through the 20 physical armor and 15 HP. How would he deal with 35 damage? He figures anyone would struggle with that much damage. He looks at his skills and remembers the Goblin Assault skill he picked up when he saved Shinobu. Keisha is still worried about his attack, but Mizuki is determined to try something really brave. He asks her to telepathically contact Carol and instruct her to create an opening for him to attack as he loads the chip damage scale into the skill book and activates it. Carol uses her legs to hit the ogre in the face, giving Mizuki a chance to attack. He stacks the chip damage. Normally, this technique would require a cooldown, but those limits don't apply to his skills since they have already been carded. As he attacks, Keisha notices the skill wears off quickly, but at least he now knows he can stack his skills. As he shoots again, Carol reports that the ogre only has 13 HP left. Mizuki fires everything he has but hits it only once. There's no time for regrets. He must keep attacking. The ogre retaliates by throwing Mizuki's gun away. Carol also physically attacks the monster. With only 1 HP left, Mizuki takes the gamble and loads Goblin Assault. He stacks the skill multiple times and delivers the final chip assault, attacking the ogre with everything he's got. Mizuki attacked with a 31 damage dropkick to the ogre's stomach, but he slammed into it, causing him to bounce back. The impact of the kick also threw the monster into a wall. Although the dropkick itself did 0 damage, the combined effect of the chip damage and Goblin Assault dealt 31 points, which wasn't enough to penetrate the monster's combined 32 points of HP and armor. Mizuki was confused about whether the attack worked, but the monster stood up, now angrier than ever. Mizuki thought he should have anticipated that the dropkick wouldn't deal more than 2 points of damage. As the monster reloaded its electric energy, Mizuki struggled to maintain his composure, reminding himself that he had practiced reloading his gun and didn't need to panic. However, he didn't have time to draw the chip damage again as the monster gathered all its power for an attack. He was ready to shoot when Keisha pulled out the skill book, retrieved the chip damage, and began shooting. Mizuki affirmed that Keisha is the greatest fairy in the world. As he stopped firing, uncertain if his shots were successful, the monster fell to the ground, defeated. Mizuki and Keisha breathed a sigh of relief, having finally managed to overcome the beast. Carol, unharmed, looked at the other members who were unconscious. She tried to wake them by hitting their faces, noting that they were paralyzed by the monster's electric waves. Then one of the members called for Captain Carol and showed her the item Horimiya had been seeking, a sleek potion bottle with a statue of a girl with wings on its front. Mizuki was suspicious about how easily this potion had been found. Carol also agreed it was odd to find such a valuable item in a single dungeon delve. Mizuki asked Carol if she suspected the potion might be fake, and she agreed that it could be. However, since it belonged to Horimiya, they could get it tested by a professional appraiser. They would feel more comfortable if it were a replica rather than a genuine item, as that would mean all their luck had been used up. Mizuki then asked Keisha if such coincidences were common. She honestly replied that she wasn't sure, noting that blessings from EIR were standard items in her world, but perhaps their world hadn't ventured as deep into dungeons. It was like treating a high potion as a legendary item, while they were still paddling in the shallows of Dragon Quest-type dungeons. When presenting the potion to Horimiya, he was surprised that they had indeed found it. It was difficult for him to believe they had located the potion, so Carol recommended waiting until an appraiser could confirm its authenticity. However, if it was genuine, as stipulated in the contract, she would expect the full reward by next week. Carol warned Mizuki that if he failed to pay properly, there would be serious consequences. Mizuki was pleased with this and extended his hand to thank Carol. She didn't accept his handshake, moved away, and then turned to say that they still had several issues to resolve involving him and would be remaining in Japan longer to investigate the dungeon. She asked Mizuki to speak with her later, and he agreed, mentioning that he was stepping out for the day. She turned around and appreciated Mizuki for saving her life, acknowledging that a lot had happened at the dungeon. Returning home, Keisha was happy that they had defeated the monster and made it back safely. Mizuki shared that it still felt surreal to him. She was excited about buying all the DVDs. As they watched TV, a news report appeared showing that the president of Horimiya Group, Horimiya Akiro, had filed for personal bankruptcy at the Tokyo District Court, with the news channel broadcasting a press conference and detailing the financial crisis. A few days later, Mizuki visits the same restaurant where Horimiya had previously taken him. A waiter arrives to take his order. Mizuki requests the steak, and to his surprise, the waiter is Horimiya himself. Mizuki confronts him, saying he didn't have to coerce him into going into a dungeon. If Horimiya had simply mentioned that his daughter's life was at stake, Mizuki would have agreed to help. Horimiya arrogantly replies that Mizuki is mistaken about his daughter and questions who told him such nonsense. Mizuki explains that Carol had mentioned it but wasn't completely sure. Horimiya then elaborates that it was a selfish demand from the wealthy, and such stories are more easily understood. In the end, Mizuki and the others accepted the roles Horimiya had assigned to them. Muzoki comments on how Horimiya went bankrupt as soon as he found something rare. Horimiya apologizes, admitting he is now penniless and cannot pay the promised amount. Mizuki responds that he figured as much and personally doesn't care about the money, but others do. The REA arrives, led by Carol, who commands that if Horimiya doesn't have the money, they will find another way for him to pay. They drag him out of the restaurant. Horinomiya arrogantly comments that they can't do anything in Japan due to its rules. He also mentions knowing about the skill book and has heard rumors of a similar skill worldwide. He claims that skill books allow skills to be used in card form and that these skills activate others in unconventional ways. Rumors suggest that the scales have been erased from records by the US government and passed to Wallace. He adds that abilities evolve with use. Everyone is shocked to hear that skills could evolve. Horinomiya looks at Mizuki and speculates that Mizuki's book might be similar, and he has not fully utilized its potential. He insists he is a valuable asset and should be spared. Mizuki thinks it's too late for that, as he has already provided them with the information they needed and is no longer required. They recorded the conversation and uploaded it to a YouTube channel named Hurry Channel, which has gained followers. The reviews are mostly positive, and this could potentially provide them with the money to pay off Horinomiya's debt. Then Carol proposes the idea that he should join the REA. He is awkward at getting a proposal out of the blue. She then, for the rat that if he will join them, they have an opportunity to test book with a number of different skills, and it would also give him economic stability as well as security and support. He learned how to protect himself and will connection and finances as he looked confused and thinking about the decision. Carol mentioned that how the REA provides him with money, woman, and accommodation. What else would he want? Mizuki confirmed what she meant by woman. She then asked that she has been told that men want woman, and REA can provide him with everything. He then awkwardly asks her, how do they provide him with women? Then Carol lies towards him and asks him, was he not satisfied with her? He is confused. She shares that she intends on him joining the REA and ultimately becoming his husband in the future. She asked that how in the UK people can marry at the age of 16 years old and special that he proving himself in the dungeon made her found a husband in him and how he is very liable and she has no complaints when it comes to abilities. A person's true strength in nature can only ever come out in the extreme condition of the dungeon, and down there he proved himself to her and showed that he is fit to be her husband and join REA and become her for the rest of the life. Awkward was expression on his face, makes Kara and come close to him and ask what was wrong with him. She mentioned that how she has some idea about why he would be worried as she is aware of the nature of men, and she would demand anything until she comes of age and develop the kind of relationship, with few things to say that Carol logic is super messed up, and when it comes to things finding in the dungeon, she then asked him a few weird questions like if he didn't like her or if he didn't like British people or their politics. He tried to change the topic by saying that he has to go back into the dungeon to deliver batteries. Carol mentions that how she would like to accompany him, and they should go tomorrow, and she would never agree to be his wife until before a first date. The next day, as Mizuki is preparing to head to the dungeon, he hears a knock on the door. Expecting it to be Carol, he opens it, but to his surprise, it's Shinobu. She looks concerned and asks why he hasn't been attending school, since it's a weekday. Shinobu came over to invite him to play some games, as she brought a few with her. Mizuki apologizes, saying he can't join her today as he has errands to run. He tries to gently push her away from his house, but just then, Carol arrives. Both women look at each other curiously and then at Mizuki. Shinobu asks who the other girl is. At the same moment, Mizuki's other friend, Karen, approaches, looking to discuss something with Mizuki. Seeing the situation, Karen decides to postpone her inquiry and leaves to wait for Mizuki outside. Carol, who is now visibly impatient, drags Mizuki along to their destination. Shinobu is left behind, wondering if Mizuki had an appointment with her. As they head towards the dungeon, Carol inquiries about Mizuki's neighbor, noting that her skill couldn't analyze him. She had tried to gather intel on him as she usually does with everyone, but that man blocked her attempts. This skill is quite rare and can disrupt her analysis. Mizuki tells that he doesn't know much about Shinobu, but more pressing is the question of Carol's own outfit. She's dressed in minimal clothing, which she reveals she wore specifically for Mizuki. She asks him if it suits her. Guided by Keshi, they reach the dragon. The dragon expresses his frustration at having waited for so long for them to return with his batteries. Mizuki apologizes for the delay and asks the dragon if the dungeon is creating a connection between their world and another. The dragon confirms that it is indeed the case but explains that it is unlikely they can return Kishi to her world. He reveals that the old world where Kishi came from might not even exist anymore, as the Black One had ended it to form a bridge to his world. The group is astonished by this revelation. The dragon, growing drowsy, expresses relief at finally receiving the batteries. He explains that he will seal the dungeon to prevent any interruptions to his sleep and will remain dormant for a millennium or so. Mizuki and the others thank him for his patience. The dragon adds that had they been even a bit later, he would have come out of the dungeon to destroy their world. As they say their goodbyes, the dragon mentions he may see them again in 1,000 years. As Mizuki returns home and parks his car, he notices a girl waiting for him at the stairs. Seeing Mizuki, she stands up and asks if he would be willing to become her dungeon advisor. A dungeon advisor, Mizuki is taken aback after he hears this. The girl introduces herself as Tachibana Maki from the city hall. She introduces herself on the top of the voice and in the anxiety of seeing Mizuki and asking for his help. She suddenly felt something weird and fainted. Mizuki grabbed her just in time and is confused about what is going on Earth. Tachibana is stuck in a situation. In her office, his superior informs him that only she was left that has not found a dungeon advisor. She apologizes to her superior. He confirms whether or not she is aware of the date of the ceremony. She agrees she knows it is next week. He goes on about how the unveiling ceremony will have some bigwigs from Tokyo attending, and if she doesn't have this sorted till next week, she will be in a colossal disaster. Hearing this, she senses her heartbeat rising up, and she puts her hand on her chest. She apologizes for hyperventilating. His senior is disappointed, asking if she was again anxious, and says a snarky comment that she needs to come back and see him once she has calmed down. She sits on the ground in her hyperventilating state and calms herself down by taking deep breaths, filling her belly. Then she slowly releases it all. She picks herself up and tries to process the situation. Determined to resolve her issue, Tachibana contacts an adventurer. On hearing their negative response, she replies how she did understand their situation and thanked them for taking out time for the meeting. She can't seem to find any adventurer to be her advisor, and she can't afford to lose this job. She finally landed this job, and if she was fired, she will let her folks down. A co-worker named Kawatani startled Tachibana. When she asked him what happened to him, he commented how she probably knows what he wants to ask her. He continued inquiring about her progress in finding an advisor. Tachibana explains that she's reaching out to everyone she can think of, but hasn't had any luck, and this is tough. Her co-worker offers to use his connections to find someone, but his offer comes with a creepy undertone, adding, of course, if that would be all right with Tachibana. He puts his hand on her shoulder. She is scared and asks him if doing this was okay. He thinks it is absolutely correct. He suggests that once the ceremony is successfully wrapped up, they both will be a part of the cave management team, and then in exchange Tachibana will owe him a favor, and he leans in suggestively. Tachibana, lying on Mizuki's couch, she suddenly wakes up saying no, deciding to turn down that sleazy harasser's offer. Mizuki sees her wake up and asks her if she wants a drink. She sits straight and requests a sake cup of tea. Mizuki apologizes to her for rushing her and asks her more about the story that she was talking about. Tachibana describes how the situation arose from their last dungeon dive with the REA, where a mutant variant of a boss monster created a dangerous mismatch between the dungeon's levels and its creatures. The depth of the dungeon became a nightmare, and if the elite adventure team had issued a proper warning, the dungeon might have been closed off sooner. However, the discovery of ultra-rare items threw a wrench into those plans. Globally, even dungeon-related companies and governments are pushing for exploration and research. This situation isn't just affecting the city where the new dungeon appeared. It has led to Japan potentially becoming a significant frontier in dungeon exploration, making it difficult to shut the dungeon down. She explains that a new organization, the Dungeon Advisor, is being established to handle these challenges. Mizuki confirms if Tachibana wants him to be part of it. Tachibana agrees and asks what he thinks about it. Mizuki notices her taking deep breaths and her chest inhaling a lot of air, making it huge. Keshi notices and confirms Mizuki is feeling a bit pinker in his head than usual, 40% more than normal. Mizuki dismisses Keshi's observation telepathically, replying how this is not at all true. Keshi then asks him if Tachibana was his type, and he agrees that she is. Tachibana then gets on her knees, mentioning she just asks for a little help from Mizuki. She will take care of all the trivial tasks, just lending her his name is all she needs. She won't put any burden on him, and he would just have to sit next to her, and that would be more than enough. She goes on to say that the government will also ensure proper rewards for him. She again starts showing signs of distress and asks Mizuki if he could take this for her. Mizuki gently tells her to take a deep breath and calm down. Tachibana collapses again, overwhelmed by the stress. After regaining her composure, Tachibana apologizes for her being flustered and her panicked behavior. Mizuki asks Keshi what she thinks. She mentions how this big-chested lady here looks like a genuine girl just on the edge of her limits. She explains that due to the whole dungeon debacle, the authority hastily created a new position called the Cave Management Chief, and she was chosen as one of the initial recruiters. Due to seniority-based hiring practices, she ended up mixed in with the seasoned pros who were brought in as reinforcements later on. Mizuki, seeing the gravity of her situation, realizes that Tachibana is in a tough spot and that she's desperate to find a qualified advisor. Tachibana shares how she is still missing a dungeon advisor to partner with, and they just told her to bring anyone from the top, so here she was trying to convince Mizuki. Mizuki mentions that isn't it true that there are plenty of adventures to be found all over the country. She agrees that there are, but to be an advisor there are certain standards to be followed. Mizuki clarifies that he is still a total novice and recently got his qualification. She insists that Mizuki fits the criteria since he recently dealt with a legendary monster or something. Mizuki thinks to himself that this is true, he was the one that dealt with the final boss mutant ogre. She shares how all other adventurers who met the standards turned down the offer, leaving her with no other options but to ask him for help. Mizuki understands her position now. He shares that he needs some time to think over the proposal. Tachibana agrees that it is a valid point, but he has to tell soon because a bigwig from Kastamigasteki is expected to visit next week, and she needs to have an advisor lined up. As the important unveiling event for the Cave Management Chief position is next week and he needs to be there, she wanted a swift decision. Mizuki, with a hesitant look, asks her if she wants the decision right now. Tachibana gets down on the floor again, pleading in front of Mizuki, mentioning how serious she is. He is reminded of his past experiences tackling sales targets with similar determination, and if he wouldn't, his boss would unleash unimaginable pressure on him that made him lose his mind. How could Mizuki turn down her plea, especially when it feels like he's gazing his past self into a mirror? She begins to speak that she won't take too much of his time, and at once puts her hand on her mouth. She was feeling like vomiting. Mizuki guides her to the bathroom. As she is in the bathroom, Keshi and Mizuki talk about the situation. Keshi thinks that he could lend his name for the time being. Mizuki agrees that if Keshi is agreeing, that means there is nothing shady going on. As she comes back from the bathroom after cleaning up, she starts to apologize for the inconvenience that she may have caused. Mizuki stops her and mentions how he has considered her earnest plea and agrees that she can borrow his name and she can go ahead. Tachibana, feeling a wave of relief, confirms if he was being her advisor. Mizuki asks for clarification that this was all about connecting with someone else, right? She agrees that is correct and thanks him profusely and apologizes for the inconvenience. Keshi is happy that Mizuki has done a good thing. Tachibana takes a leave, mentioning how she is so tired that she has started sounding strange. Mizuki tells her to let him know if anything else comes up. Next week, as the event comes and Mizuki visits the office, Tachibana runs towards him calling his name. She welcomes him by bowing in front of him and appreciates that he came. Mizuki is wearing a suit. He mentions that when times are tough, they could be there for each other, and he'll remove the temporary setup soon when this is wrapped. He thinks that if attending one ceremony can save her, then he's up for it. He also misses Keshi's snarky commentary. Tachibana then takes the lead and takes him to the waiting room. He could hear people around them, how the girl was able to get somebody along with her. Mizuki turns his head listening to people talk. He is concerned as he thinks that this doesn't seem like that. It's just a matter of borrowing a name. As they entered the waiting room, different adventures seemed to be assembled in space. Tachibana suggested they head to the back where it would be quieter. Mizuki felt quite awkward in the environment. He decided to get up and grab a drink. She offered to get it for him, but Mizuki insisted he could manage it himself. This was overseen by Kawaguchi. As he approached the machine and got himself a drink, the same coworker who had been harassing Tachibana, Kawaguchi, approached Mizuki and introduced himself. Mizuki greeted him and introduced himself in return. Kawaguchi asked Mizuki if he was the dungeon advisor for Tachibana, and Mizuki confirmed that he was. Kawaguchi then inquired about the kind of reward Tachibana had offered him. Mizuki, puzzled, asked for clarification. Kawaguchi explained that there was no way Tachibana could have brought someone as qualified as Mizuki on her own, as he had made sure to lay the groundwork carefully. Mizuki is confused and asks what on earth he meant. He elaborated that the future of the nation was at stake, and the system had been rushed into place by pushy politicians. It was only a matter of time before there would be consequences for these rushed decisions. Mizuki was confused and asked what this had to do with Tachibana. Kawaguchi revealed that only those demoted for incompetence could handle the situation, and he had set Tachibana up as a scapegoat. He aimed to make management appreciate him by assigning a crucial role to someone he deemed utterly useless. Mizuki questioned what authority Kawaguchi had to make such claims. Kawaguchi confidently replied that he was the one truly in charge and smirkily asked if he understood what he was saying. Offended, Mizuki highlights how he would not care if he would vanish. Kawaguchi takes the can out of Mizuki's hand and said that he would handle the cleanup and that Mizuki could leave now as he throws the can into garbage. Mizuki was bewildered, still trying to understand the situation. Kawaguchi then remarked that if Mizuki still didn't understand what was going on, their plan was to have Tachibana shoulder all the future issues, making a colossal mistake right now. He suggested that if an unknown adventurer appeared suddenly, it would cause a real headache, implying that Tachibana was being set up for failure. He considered Mizuki a random adventurer who got wooed by Tachibana's teary eyes and showed up for help. He then mentions how great Mizuki felt when she begged for his help. Mizuki remained puzzled and mentioned that he couldn't make sense of Kawaguchi's ramblings. Kawaguchi then said that it seemed they were in the same boat and walked away, suggesting he might end up backing out on his own. Returning to his chair, Mizuki came back with a can of drink and handed it to Tachibana. She politely refused, saying she couldn't accept it, but Mizuki insisted, saying he had already taken care of it. As he sat down, Kawaguchi turned and asked Mizuki how long it had been since he got his adventurer's license. Tachibana stood to answer, but Mizuki stopped her by raising a hand and replied that if Kawaguchi was so interested, he could look it up himself. Kawaguchi commented on Mizuki's coldness, to which Mizuki responded that he can obtain this information as an employee of the city hall. Kawaguchi then asked if Mizuki even knew who his advisor partner was. He revealed that his partner was the legendary Umayahara of Japan, a prestigious level 39 adventurer. He expressed his wish that Tachibana wasn't stuck with someone as inexperienced as Mizuki. Irritated, Mizuki asked Kawaguchi what his issue was, as he had been acting strange from the start. Tachibana stepped forward and excused herself, explaining to Kawaguchi that Mizuki had been extremely busy and had taken on all the escort duties despite the strain. Kawaguchi, angered by her tone, asked if she had a problem with him. Tachibana mustered her courage and responded that it was wrong of him to speak to Mizuki that way. He bullied her, stating that it was pointless to take advice from someone as useless as her. Mizuki taunts Kawaguchi that picking fights seemed to be his favorite pastime. Kawaguchi insisted he wasn't planning to fight, just pointing out facts. He then indicated some adventurers seated a little farther away, mentioning that they included the vice president of the Japan Adventure Guild and the captain of the Adventurers Party researchers, along with Mr. Umayahara, the 3 highest-level adventurers. Kawaguchi then asked Mizuki who he was. Mizuki reintroduced himself as a former sales department member of Kawa Securities and asked if Kawaguchi had a problem with that. Kawaguchi commented that Mizuki didn't seem to fit in with the group of adventurers and seemed like a sore thumb. Tachibana replied that this wasn't true at all. Mizuki seconded her that he was summoned here by the illustrious Tachibana Maki. Mizuki sarcastically pointed out that Kawaguchi's hairpiece was slipping, and when Kawaguchi adjusted it, Mizuki noted that he had first thought it was just a jab, but it turned out Kawaguchi was actually wearing a hairpiece. Just then, a military man entered, thanking everyone for waiting and apologizing for being late due to other business. He recognized Mizuki as he once had taught Mizuki how to handle firearms. He introduced himself as Major Hamada. Mizuki expressed surprise at meeting him here and thanked him for his help in the past. Major Hamada shared that he had always believed they would cross paths again and was glad to see Mizuki. He praised Mizuki by patting him on the back for his performance in dungeon exploration and mentioned how the government came handy. He also asked him about the magazine placement that was just perfect over there. Mizuki agreed. Mizuki thanked him for that and asked what brought him here. He shares he was part of the personnel from the self-defense forces, managing firearms and other supplies for the dungeon. He was collaborating with the city on this task. He then inquired if Mizuki was the summoned advisor. Mizuki confirmed that he was, and Major Hinata jokingly mentioned that if he had a chance, he would have appointed Mizuki as his advisor right away, but someone else had beaten him to it. Hinata then asked who Mizuki's partner was. Mizuki introduced Tachibana, and Hinata extended his hand to thank her, introducing himself from the Japan Ground Self-Defense Forces. He expressed his eagerness to work together from now on. Tachibana, a bit stirred by the handshake, responded positively, looking forward to their collaboration. Hinata then remarked that Tachibana must be the chief overseeing the city's new position. Tachibana was puzzled by this comment, but Hinata encouraged her not to be modest, suggesting that if she was paired with Mizuki, it implied she was aware of certain matters. He asked Mizuki if he was considering joining the Royal Executive Arms. Hinata mentioned having a significant network and being privy to some of the latest buzz, which he would love to share with Mizuki the juicy details. Kawaguchi, overhearing from a distance, looked increasingly annoyed. Kawaguchi interrupts the conversation between Mizuki and Hinata by laughing at him. He points at him that he is a fool who thinks he can just waltz into the Royal Executive Arms REA. Tachibana, Hinata, and Mizuki stand there in silence. Kawaguchi then mentions he was unaware what REA were they talking about. He remembers he saw there was something with that name at the outlet mall. Hinata is surprised that this man was seriously unaware about the UK's most legendary party. He then turns to Mizuki, who was this guy cracking these jokes. Mizuki shared that this guy goes by the name Kawaguchi, a civil servant from the city hall. Mizuki then excuses himself and takes Major Hinata to a room. He asks him to keep it under the wraps that he is a Royal Executive Arms and that he has delved into the dungeons with the REA. Hinata is confused why he can't admit it. Major Hinata asks was this not the reason he was summoned here. He explains it is not like that at all, and right now the Royal Executive Arms have no intention of joining the REA. He is confused what this was supposed to mean. It's like being offered a spot in a foreign pro soccer team and then turning it down. He then continues that he heard Carol has personally scouted for him. He agreed that was true. He mentions an opportunity that comes around every day and asks if he is out of his mind. He mentions that he is just mulling over a few things. Major Hinata indecision will be his downfall. He then mentions a quote that the only fish that flows with the river is dead fish. Mizuki is not impressed by this quote and asks him whose words he was quoting. Major Hinata mentions it's a habit of his to twist someone else's wisdom into his own thoughts, be it an Englishman or a Frenchman. Mizuki then mentions how he will keep that in mind, and he mentioned that Kawada from earlier is the head of the new department. Hinata advised him that he is a clueless fool and will make a real-life struggle. They then leave the room. Hinata ensures that he will take care of it. Mizuki is not that sure that he can really do something like this. Hinata ensures him, mentioning he has connections. Mizuki mocks him that having connections is not the magical solution to everything. At the grand unveiling ceremony, Kawaguchi is standing on the podium and begins to speak how truly honored he is that he got such an important role, and this dungeon is the future of Japan and how it's a rapidly growing field that can be considered a new frontier of science. He then calls upon on stage Colonel Hamada, a third-class level from the Ministry of Defense. As he heads towards the stage, a lot of people in the crowd start asking questions that he is the same lieutenant from the Great Isekai'd disasters, and was he been urgently summoned to the command center regarding the new dungeon. As he reached the mic on the podium, he greeted the crowd that he is Lieutenant Hinata from the command center. He could throw around a bunch of formalities, but as time is money, he would come straight to the point. He starts about transcending the boundaries of government and private sectors to form a triumphant triad of self-defense forces, bureaucracies, and civilian enterprises, and this marks the essential shift in how they all manage dungeons moving forward, and to transforms thus uncharted territory into a treasure trove for our nation's future, and they shall nurture and oversee the dungeon's evolution. Japan, having lagged in the initial race, will once again take the lead in global dungeon research and development. And to achieve this, they must converge at the point that transcends traditional barriers and so is ready to share with all of them. The decision was made by the government and staff, so they should be ready to break the news ahead of the curve. He is pleased to announce the execution of the exercise, which is the very first dungeon integration, live action, great establishment, and enhancement of a robust and practical dungeon operation capability, mobilizing the said defense forces, government and private sectors, plus the establishment of a collaborative framework. The humbly declared this announcement there. Mizuki, hearing this feed that he is also will be swept into participating in this, then connects over call with Carol. She thinks that is the perfect opportunity to test the skill book. She shares how she also received an invitation in REA, including herself, will participate as advisors, and thinks it is a practical training exercise against captured monsters. Mizuki asked her if she got an invitation from someone named Hamada. She agreed that she did, and asked him if he knew about him. Carol seems that they can borrow those national skills, and they should not sit this one out. He also thinks the same, and he already has a list of skills in hand, and is thinking of snagging some unlisted ones that he wants to try out in advance. Carol then asks him in the end will he sell the skill book, as that's the ticket. Mizuki mentions how it is probably not the best fit for adventure. Carol disagrees. Carol advised him even after selling the skill book he could join the REA for a while, as after the massive, the things may be chaotic, and if that happens, then Carol can guarantee his safety if he chose to take that part. Keshi also thinks that experiencing firsthand before deciding isn't a bad idea, and he will keep it in mind. She then goes on to mention that she has her eyes on him and the skill book is merely a tool. Mizuki, after listening to this, mentions that he might have to pay a visit to her after all. She then asks him to think about it carefully and asks why he blocked his lane. He answered that he did so because she kept sending him weird pictures and clothes that were a bit too tight for comfort. She says that she was sending full-body shots from both front and back for reference, and that's what it's called a risk photo. She goes on and mentions how after marriage having different perceptions can lead to trouble, and this is important information that must be shared. Mizuki disagrees that no matter what she says, she was sharing an underage photo like that, which according to Japanese law could cause him serious trouble. Later, as Keshi and Mizuki are chilling on the sofa and watching the news, a breaking news comes that shares a breakout of key features from the dungeon has occurred, and a goblin has apparently made an escape from the dungeon. Keisha thinks that is it wild and insane that something like this has happened. As this news breaks out on the screen, the doorbell rings. Shinobu and she share how she may have gone overboard on purpose and bought some surplus for him to try. Mizuki says that's not what it's called and the correct word is overdoing. She confirms that she has not put anything weird in the food. Mizuki mentions how he has not even said a word and she is over-explaining herself. Shinobu then teases him saying, if possible, he could place it on the second shelf where she can see it in the living room or near his PC, confirming that she was just kidding. She then shares with Mizuki that she is thinking of making a comeback and asks him to see her latest videos. He's worried that she has still not learned her lesson. She assured him that this time she'll keep it all above board and how she aims to be like Hibakin, a person who charms and just keeps getting success without lifting a finger. She hands him the package and leaves. He comes back in and opens the package. The news is still running in the background about how adventure incidents are on the rise. As he eats the food, it's a delicious snack to eat. Mizuki tells Keshi that he hasn't spotted Heath around lately. The next day, as Tachibana is getting ready, she gets a message on his phone that Mizuki has arrived as she goes downstairs. They are waiting for her in the car. She thanked him for coming and picking her up. Mizuki assures her it was not at all a big deal. Carol, sitting on the front seat, confirms if she was Tachibana and introduces herself as Carol Middleton, the commander of REA, and mentions how she's here to join them on their journey of exploration. Tachibana is amazed that she was talking about REA. She also mentioned that all the information that they gather must be strictly confidential. Tachibana is intimidated by Carol. Mizuki tries to calm her down by saying that she should not be too intimidated. They are just ordinary people with the stamp of approval. Carol agrees that no special treatment was required. Mizuki explains that it might not know about this, but REA, a renowned adventurer from the UK. Tachibana is shocked how a little girl like her is an adventurer. He explained that she is even stronger than Mizuki himself. Carol then mentions how Mizuki is engaged to her. She is surprised that he was engaged to such a young girl. Mizuki reluctantly replies that he is not engaged to her. She mentions how he has stared at her naked body for very long. He is embarrassed and explains that she should not get a wrong idea as she was wearing her underwear. They are almost at their destination. Mizuki has no say in this awkward conversation. Keshi, listening to this, always thinks that Mizuki's hands are always full. As Tachibana tries to train for fighting, she asked Mizuki if she was doing okay. He replied that she was doing just fine, and there is no problem at all. He then explains that they will handle the fighting. Mainly Carol will take charge. She then mentions that she heard whispers at the office, but she never imagined that girl would be REA. Mizuki agrees that's something people can think at first. She is super happy to have someone so important join her in work, and she thinks the same about Mizuki, that he is truly a great adventurer. He is blushing on listening to his praise and mentions that Halki is just a small part of all of it. She claims if this wasn't for the situation, she wouldn't have been earning so much more. She apologizes for things not going as promised. Mizuki stops her from apologizing and confirms that today's intrusion request was his own and was for his practice and verification, and they should get Tachibana's status updated too. As they are having this conversation, Carol walks in. She apologizes for keeping Mizuki waiting and asks them to get going. She is wearing new armor and asks what is going on, looking at her outfit. Mizuki asked her if she bought a new one. She explains that this time this is much more than a costume. It's crafted from dungeon loot and it packs a punch. It's not just about the loot, but it's a loot gear with a purpose. Mizuki asks if there was no gear that was practical yet not lewd. She is amazed that Mizuki didn't find this look delightful. He then asked her, what kind of enhancement was she talking about? She explains that every time one feels a hint of embarrassment, her attack and speed gets a boost, and the more the one moves, the more the fabric clings with wet for ignite that sense of shame. He then asks her, what was the point of that, as she didn't have a sense of shame? Carol is annoyed by this comment and mentions how this could hurt someone's feelings, while Tachibana is amazed and sees how truly remarkable adventures are. Carol explains the status transformation only takes a few minutes. Carol is standing very close to Mizuki, which is making him uncomfortable, while Tachibana is concerned if the status transformation hurts at all. Carol explains that if she just waits, it will pop out in no time, and then suddenly a light appear in front of her, revealing her status looking at the screen. She is confused at what all these things in his status even mean. Carol looks at her chart and mentions that her other base may be low, but she has got a sharp potential as a starting point and her charm value is high. It is a gauge for brainwashing, hypnosis, incitement, and inspiration. Mizuki thinks it sounds wicked. Carol shares that it is said that it's one of the most fearsome skills out there. She explains with an example. The charm skill or hypnosis allows one to control their target for the entire turn, literally bending their mind to one's will, and leading to betrayal or even self-destruction at her command. Mizuki is also concerned that even that is a bit too powerful. Carol mentioned that's why it's the most terrifying. But unlike fire, which can be unleashed as long as the meat is required, the difference in ability scores alone determines whether it can be activated or not. Mizuki asks if the charm value of 29 was enough to get the charm activated. Carol explains the initial value is nothing short of extraordinary, and with some training, Tachibana can become a formidable user of the charm skill. As Mizuki asks about the power Takeshi, she explains that she has telepathy as her mental sensitivity, which is totally different, just like an animal's horns or wings. It's the unique abilities of fairies to do telepathic communication, but since they belong to a similar category, she can sense the ones that are close by. Then Carol offers Tachibana to join the REA. Tachibana is completely blown away by the proposal. Carol is adamant and mentions how she was just thinking that they needed someone, a skill user who is a perfect fit like her. Mizuki comments, is it that easy to get into the REA? But Carol emphasizes that opportunity like these are rare, and it takes years to cultivate, but she should absolutely want to seize this chance. Tachibana confirms if Carol is even serious, but Carol confirms that she doesn't joke around. Carol then mentioned her starting salary could be 40,000. She then goes on and promises at least 100,000 pounds if they can break in together. Mizuki says he is not sure about the pound to yen conversion, but it would be several million yen. Tachibana couldn't believe that she would get such a high pay. She then asks Tachibana to seriously consider the opportunity and get back. Mizuki thinks about how Carol's quirks are shown again. Then a goblin appears and Carol swiftly attacks the goblin and he is in half on the ground. Seeing them both talking, Mizuki thinks to himself that is quite a spectacle to watch. She then asks Tachibana if she has ever encountered one. She replies that this was her first time seeing a goblin. She then explains that they are more dangerous than they look and one should not underestimate them. And whenever you see one goblin, she should assume that 3 more are lurking around. She also adds that, but in the depth lurk even more dangerous enemies, and how she is itching for a showdown with the boss slime next, and the boss drops a rare treasure called the level crystal. As she explains all this information, Tachibana writes everything down. As Mizuki looks at Carol's bottom, Keshi teases him that how he earlier mentioned he was a chest person, so why was he looking at Carol's bottom? He answered that this doesn't mean that he dislikes butts. Carol then asks Mizuki if he was alright. He replies that he was, but she thinks that she knows what's going on. Carol thinks as she has been so focused on Tachibana, she has ruffled his feathers, but Mizuki denies that he is not feeling anything and asks her to continue telling Tachibana more about the dungeon. She points out how it's written all over his face, and after all he has a cute side to him. Mizuki defends that this was not his style, but Carol continues to tease him that if he is mad at her, they could do a little make-up kiss. Mizuki asked her to stop teasing him, and they should move on already. As they look around, they find that Tachibana can't be seen anywhere near. As they looked around, they saw that the upper body of Tachibana was inside the wall and only her lower body was out. They are confused on what on earth was happening. Mizuki tries to pull her out by pulling his legs out of the wall. Carol realizes that it is Master Slime and lost in its own structure, and this entire cave is the Master Slime disguise. Carol attacks with the flame fire sword and then asks Mizuki to fire an assault. As she attacked the slime wall with fire at flame, Mizuki gets ready to attack with the skill book and asks where he should aim. He also aims with fire at the ceiling with explosion phenomena and blast and flame. The ceiling bursts into small pieces as the slime wall breaking. Tachibana is thrown out of the world, but her shirt is missing. Mizuki is awkward seeing her without her shirt and is concerned that what kind of magic substance only melts clothes. She then is given something to cover up, and she shares how she thought that she was going to die. Carol mentioned how if she had been just a moment late, she would have been reduced to a mere specimen. Mizuki, picking up a crystal in his hand, mentions that this is a level crystal, a rare treasure occasionally dropped by bosses. Carol reassures Tachibana that she doesn't need to worry as no harm was done, and as did dive deeper into the dungeon. The more danger, the stronger they become, and it is a wild experience. The crystal is a precious item that enhances the level when used. Mizuki asks by how much will it increase the levels. Some rare shades of purple can boost your level by 5 shares, Carol. Mizuki then mentions how the crystal will fetch quite a handsome prize and would be worth hundreds of millions. Carol thinks it is the perfect time, and this is just what they needed. He gives the crystal to Carol and tells her that she can do whatever she wants to do with it. Carol decides to give it to Tachibana to increase skill level. She is honored that a crystal that is so expensive was given to her. Carol thinks now that her level has increased, this means she can finally see the true power of those enchanting skills, and this power is an instant game changer. Carol then mentions that she'll have the contract and other documents sent from the REA's office and she can share her address and phone number later. She agrees that she would. Carol mentions that today turned out to be a wonderful day and asks Mizuki that they should go home and grab some ramen on their way home, and then she goes further and invites Tachibana to join them for ramen. Tachibana believes being an adventurer is definitely tough. As Keisha and Mizuki go back to the room given to them, they were staying in the integrated practical examination training facility accommodation. Keshi mentions how she is not that disappointed by the room as she imagined it to be much worse, and they would be living in a stable. Mizuki explains that this is just a plain old business hotel. Kishi does her stretches after being in Mizuki's pocket for a long day, mentioning how exhausted the ride was, and she didn't even bring her portable charger. She then looks around the room only to realize that there is no TV in the room and think that she's going to die of boredom. Mizuki is surprised that a fairy would not just drop dead over a missing television, but she thinks that now that she has tasted the joy of the material world, she would have been happier not knowing. Mizuki asks her once she is satisfied, they'll head to the opening ceremony. As they go to the opening ceremony, Mizuki sits with Tachibana as the announcer welcomes the illustrious Captain Carol Middleton of the REA for opening remarks. Carol takes center stage and greets the crowd, introducing herself that she is Carol Middleton. She is the captain of the British Adventure Party REA, and this time they are here to prepare for the unexpected event to share their insights on cave-dwelling creatures. Mizuki, listening to her, thinks that she definitely has a commanding presence, Keshi mentions, but beneath that replica armor that she is wearing is her true bikini armor that they only know about. As she leaves the stage, the announcer concludes the opening ceremony. As Umayahara, another famous adventurer, began to leave after the conclusion of the ceremony, the crowd grows crazy and wants his autograph. People are asking him questions like if he defeated the boss Chimera all by himself and was on talkative bond the other day as they saw on TV. He tries to dodge the questions by saying that they'll talk about the topic in the next exercise, and as these people are approaching him, his bodyguard stops them and asks them to not interact with him today as he is busy. As Carol returns, Mizuki mentions how impressive her speech was. She agrees that she is quite good at things like that. She then looks at Tachibana and asks her if she had time to glance over the contract. She said that she did, but she would just hold on a little longer before signing the contract. Carol mentioned how she has already summoned a charm skill that will make them irresistible. Tachibana agrees she will hand the contact over when she has some time later. As they are having this conversation, Captain Himada walks in. Captain Himada greets everybody. Carol mentions how it's been quite a while. Himada mentions it was great to see the commander of REA again. He then shows her his badge, mentioning how he is already a major and not a captain anymore. Carol apologizes for the mistake and mentions how his strong presence lingers on her mind. Mizuki confirmed that Carol and Himada were acquaintances. He then shares that they have crossed paths before at the military cave gathering in the UK. That was last summer, Carol confirmed. As the people from far away see them all talking, and they are concerned about who this person is and should they watch out for him also. They are then approached by Kawatani, and he shakes hands with Carol. He introduces himself as Kawatani, the team leader in the dungeon management division, and how he looks forward to them working during the exercise. Carol, listening to this, asks him if he is the leader of the dungeon management division. He explains how he plays a role similar to that. Carol then goes on and confirms if he is the boss of Tachibana and how it's a perfect time to meet him, as Tachibana will leave her job very soon. Tachibana is in shock listening to her talk. Kawatani is amazed at Tachibana taking retirement. Carol continues about how his subordinate has the making of an adventure, and she thought that it would be wise to run this idea by him. Hamada also looks surprised and asks her if Tachibana was also joining the REA. Tachibana replies that it is not certain in stone yet. Major Hamada is happy listening to this and pats her on the back and mentions she would be the perfect match for Mizuki, and their encounter turned out to be fruitful. He then turns to Mizuki, informing him that the practical exercises will kick off tomorrow, and he can't wait to see his skills, taking down the boss Orga variant. Carol replies that indeed, Mizuki will certainly meet Hamada's expectations, as after all, he is her husband. He adds that he also has high hopes for Tachibana's talent, to which Carol adds that Tachibana will definitely rise to Hamada's expectation, especially since she is destined to be her future subordinate. Listening to this, Tachibana standing next to Mizuki thinks that they are in a bit of a pickle themselves, and he mentions how they are already in a predicament and are realizing it too late. Day 2 of the training exercise, and Mizuki gets ready to get the show on the road. Mizuki double-checks the card that he plans to use that day and one that they have newly acquired. Keshi again apologizes for turning a newly acquired skill into a card without permission. He is still confused that whether his skill book will ever sell or not, and wonders that if a skill can revert once it has been formed as a card. He also mentioned how he is buried under a mountain of debt to the country, and the only way that he could get out of it is to hit the jackpot in the dungeon. He was obviously talking about a loan. But this time, Keshi wants to correct her mistake by finding a way to fix it. Mizuki wonders what is the deal with this newbie card. 2 thrilling turns, the card doubles the power of fire attribute magic, igniting the battlefield with explosive forces. Clinging to still glimmers of hope that it might retreat if he didn't use a simple enhancement card, it's a skill that made him hesitant for a single moment during the rescue of Tachibana-san. He also mentioned how this card covers the lackluster defensive skills that the current skill Shining Beacon of Protection. Transparency for 1 turn, and you become impervious to physical attacks from like a ghost in a fray. And finally, the skill that actually caught Mizuki's eye, 2 exhilarating turns, it double the effects of any enhancement that one receives. This card boasts a unique skill that enhances enhancement, creating a delightful synergy when laying skill books. He also stocked up on Flame and Goblin Charge that they have had for a while now. He then closes the skill book and is ready to rendezvous with Tachibana. Keshi is excited. Then Keshi and Mizuki decide to get along with their plan and start their day. Today Mizuki is wearing a loose adventurer outfit. He asks Keisha about how the outfit of this uniform felt. She replies that she is feeling very comfortable in this as she lies in the pocket of the outfit. She replies that this is much more comfortable than any jeans or other outfit that he has worn. As he locks his door and steps out, he sees Umayahara-san. He tackles Mizuki, mentioning how he has a question in mind that he would like to ask him. Umayahara-san charges towards Mizuki and traps him in between his arms, looks into his eyes, and asks him about the Royal Executive Arms and how Mizuki is in talks with them to enter the REA. He wants to know if this information is really true. He replies that there is no plan for that at the moment. He asks about the woman Tachibana, was she about to enter the REA? He replies that he doesn't think that that's happening either. He lets him go out of his hold and mentions how he can't believe that REA would actually pick inexperienced kids like them, speaking of which he heard a terrible joke about him, taking down a mutant boss ogre all by himself. Mizuki replies that that it is not entirely true. Umayahara says he understands that. He likes he has been hoisted up on a pedestal and shares how he has had similar moments. It's a common occurrence in the adventure scene given how fast the market is, just like those idol actors who get pushed into leading roles despite lacking talent, and he mentions how he also used to be one of them. They are just marketing the adventure as Japan's #1 adventure. Even without any achievement, the TV shows that he has bought a massive arsenal of skills as all the channels are under his belt. He continues and mentions that back in the day, there were no adventures around, so he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted, but thanks to all the help that he had received, He finally stands tall now and asks Mizuki if he was in the same boat. Mizuki explains that is not what he meant, but he gets it that he is pulling in REA too. So the next generation star is none other than him. What a brilliantly crafted script. Umayahara absolutely love it. Mizuki tries to explain to himself that the REA captain is unbelievably stunning girl, and Mizuki knows that she's going to be hit listening to this. He mentions how he has now understood how the situation is. As he leaves, he tells him that they should swap their contact info and could really help each other out later. Mizuki then asks Keshi, but she replies that he doesn't need to worry as there are no secrets lurking around. She assures him that if things get dicey, she will send a telepathic SOS and heartbeat. Mizuki thanks her and mentions how that would be super helpful. As he looks at his phone, he sees a message from Tachibana mentioning that she needs him. He thinks that this message doesn't sound good, and they need to hurry up. As he reaches her room and opens the door of Tachibana's room, his eyes meet half-dressed Tachibana. He closes his eyes, blushing and apologizes for intrusion. Keshi caught him staring at Tachibana's chest. Mizuki asked her from the closed door that this doesn't seem like a crisis, and if there is something wrong she can say it. She replies that she's really sorry for the embarrassing scene he just saw, and she was in the wrong, and it was her thoughtlessness while changing that caused this mess. But Mizuki thinks that in situations like this, it's the man who always takes the blame and not the girl. As they both awkwardly lead for the training, at the event the Integrated Practical Testing Training Ground. The announcer Kawaguchi announces that everybody should prepare themselves for a thrilling demonstration of skill, rapid fire by adventurer Umayahara. The target monster will be a self-replica created using earth manipulation skills, so nobody needs to worry in the depths of the dungeon. The Chimera is a common ogre lurking in the shallows and ready for action. The base stamina of this monster is ogre, and he also has head that possesses unique health, complete with distant weakness and resistances of lightning, frost, and fire. He mentions how this makes it incredibly tough to take down a monster that single adventure or modern fire can't handle, but for adventure like him, it was easy. He then attacks with Ice Strike and Thunder Shock, and just like that, by accurately targeting each of his enemy's weaknesses, he brought him down. However, these rapid-fire skills require a certain level of intelligence to be used effectively, and indeed he can go solo in the combat, but for others, it is not advisable. As he defeats the monster, he mentions how the real Chimera is bigger quicker than this stone, and if he takes on a single one of them himself, if he could off a wing 12 points of attribute damage in one goal like him. All of the people in the audience starts cheering him and talking about how things are adventure are something, and they don't care how many rounds of the Type 89, and they have really done, and gossip about how Umayahara is the boss Chimera all by himself. The commitment intermention that we don't need to worry as there's no danger there. As mentioned earlier, this is a manual operation, and from here they'll be using the golem as a virtual enemy. Carol motivates Mizuki to try the skill book on the golem. Lieutenant Himada also appreciates him and mentions how he got it. Carol mentions how just 1 point of health is left, and he could let it rest in peace, no matter what. Carol warns her Chimera is coming. Mizuki tries the skill that he wants to begin an explosion phenomena that doubles the power of the fire attributes with its enhancement scale, while amplification hand in hand, double the applied enhancement effects. He stacked the effects of 2 times damage 3 times and double that for a total of 6 skill boost, which just mark most of explosion phenomena. It reaches an insane power and the layers of enhancement of his heart's content. What happens to the original 4 damage of now to try? He puts out the card and try it. He then attacks the golem and mention how here is his attack inferno. They are all taken back by the explosion caused by this attack. Everybody is in shock, seeing the amount of his one move made. Carol mentions how the highest damage ever dealt globally was by Wallace Chandler from the USA and asks him if he's aware of his world record, but Suzuki doesn't understand the situation. She explains that using multiple enhancement scales, he boosted the ultimate attack to a staggering 87 points. That's the officially confirmed peak of a single strike. No idea what that last attack score he's been using. Ask how many points was his last attack. She shares how that was a single strike dealing 144 points of damage, and he has just shattered the record, but sadly, what she analyzed with her dragon scale eyes won't be an official record. Carol is proud and mentions that this is what she expected of his husband. Major Himada is also impressed that what on earth was that attack. He explains that well, he was aiming for a stronger spell, but this happened instead. Himada is present and proud that how on earth did he get to flame to pack such a bunch, and what was the book that he was using. He said that he explained it later. Himada is very excited in the cheeks. He should enjoy that he better keep his promise and explain it to him later, as this is incredible. And he is completely blown away by this attack. Carol comes in between and says that Hamada should not try to monopolize with husband too much. He mentioned how he should not forget about the book, as you would like to learn more about the skill book later, as Hamada is having this conversation with Mizuki. Keshi, telepathically, tells him that she can't seem to read what is going on in that person's heart, and Keshi thinks that they are using a charm skill from the same family. It's some kind of mental interference that he is able to resist from reading what's actually going in their heart. She is confused as to what they should do. Next, decide that the first thing they should do is consult with Carol. As Carol, Mizuki, and Tachibana met after the event, Carol mentions how, as Mizuki is here, they should get started. Mizuki is confused about what she was talking about, and he sarcastically mentions that she brought the marriage certificate. This time, Carol replies that it was something different. She replies that no, she wants to talk about something about Lieutenant Hamada and shares. When she mentioned something strange, they requested Tachibana to step out for a moment. She resists how it is her room, but they both don't listen to her, and then she stands alone outside her own room door. Carol shares her concerns that Hamada is a user of fire and charm magic, and Mizuki should be prepared for mental attacks. Mizuki asks her if it is the same charm skill as Tachibana. She explains while the skills are similar. The dimensions that entirely different fire is renowned worldwide, a master in the field, and considering Hamada's position, there is nothing strange about it. He says that he was just concerned as Kishi's telepathy didn't work out. Carol then adds that he doesn't need to worry as he is a trustworthy man, and Mizuki thinks that if Carol says that, then he'll take her word for it. Carol then suggests they should now get to the main point, and Tachibana joins them again. Carol then gives Tachibana the guidance skill, which is the lowest requirement skill in the charm category. She is concerned that didn't show up on the status screen. Carol shows her that there it is. Guidance is the most basic charm skill, and she thinks that Tachibana as a beginner should start from here. The charm skill guides the target by locking eyes with them, and its basic effect. Duration is 3 turns, and the rank level required is 20. She is confused. That is exactly what guiding a target does. Carol thinks that instead of explaining, it's best to try it out and ask her to go ahead and use guidance. Tachibana is concerned if the skill is safe or not. Carol explains it's not dangerous as long as you don't do anything weird. Carol explains how that sounds good. Tachibana, the effect of guidance can be broadly described as fearing someone's emotion in a desired direction. She asks, can someone with guidance skill manipulate someone's feelings? Carol explains that it's not manipulation per se, it's about instilling a specific emotion in someone and guiding them towards it. It's more about certainly shifting the course a few degrees. If you steer them too far in the opposite direction, the impact is minimal, so it's all about a gentle nudge. She explains that how if the emotion is already strong, if it's a similar type of emotion, and one can smoothly transition it by guiding it. Carol motivates her to give it a shot. She is confused as to what kind of emotion she should express. She then asks her to start with the emotion of sexual excitement on Mizuki. Carol asks her to do it. Mizuki asks her to wait a second. He resists and is confused how it came to this and why he was being used as a target. Carol explains how men naturally have a strong libido, so it's easy to redirect with a little variation. And that's a clear logic, and she asked Tachibana to go for it. Mizuki resists and explains how there must be deeper feelings at play. Tachibana is confused as to who to listen to, so she decides to listen to Carol and do charm magic on Mizuki. As she does charm magic by inducing sexual arousal at him, he tries to resist it by asking her to stop calling her a fool. As Mizuki gets uncomfortable, Carol appreciates Tachibana. She then asks her to move a bit to the side. She is embarrassed for Mizuki and runs away saying she was sorry for this charm skill. Then, as Carol and Mizuki are the only one in the room, she asks him how he was really feeling. Mizuki is awkward and blushing. Carol takes more advantage of the situation and tries to tease Mizuki more. As they lie on the bed, Carol is passionate and excited as she wants to embrace every part of Mizuki and is ready to tie the knot any time. As Carol leans in to kiss him, he is out of the charm and is furious that he would never let her off the hook for the situation. Carol tries to stop Mizuki and is sad that the time is already up and the charm magic is broken. As he returns back to his room, Kishi welcomes him back and complains that she can smell something foul and super pungent, and it seems like a physical smell, it's a foul stench. Mizuki listens to this and thinks about how the word sounds of something erogenous. She then complains about why she was being hit with mental attacks while she was away, and she says that he should try to understand her feelings and her situation. She then continues that it's like a smell that reminds someone of a chemical that disturbs one's mind when that particular odor lingers. She then asks him if it could be that kind of a thing as it smells like that. She explains that when a skill disturbs the mind, odor like that lingers. He explains how he was on the edge, and that's all as they are sitting. Someone knocks at the door. They are confused as to who could it be at this peculiar time. It is Hamada. He barges in and asks him if he remembered his promise. Mizuki then shares with him everything he knows about the skill book, and he understands the insane destructive power comes from the skill book, skipping the required skill levels, ignoring the stats needed for rapid-fire skills, and stacking skills like that it should be impossible, and on top of that no MP cost at all. He is impressed by the skill book. He gives an analogy that if it's soccer, that's a rule-breaking skill that would get you permanently ejected, and what total lawlessness is the skill book. Hamada then asks him if that thing is transferable. Hamada explains that there are some skills that are non-transferable skills that become one with its owner's life. For instance, Carol's dragon scale eyes for her is the scale that is inseparable from her very vision. He mentions that he is thinking about selling it as it is beyond his capabilities. Hamada is interested in as he had said the word selling. He then laughs it off by saying that everyone has their own way of living and living true to one's true self is the greatest achievement. Hamada then takes Mizuki to show him something, and they get in an elevator. Mizuki is concerned as to how far they were going as they come out of the elevator. Hamada shows him the real chimera. He explained that how he has been put to sleep with potions and magic, and today marks the final day of their practical exam, and Hamada is all set to face it into the battle. Mizuki is concerned that he was talking about real combat. He shared how adventurers need some hands-on training exercise with real monsters, and it is even happening in the US. He then shows him a level crystal. A level crystal is a crystal that can boost up level of energy. He shows Mizuki the crystal and share that a golden crystal can boost a person's level by 20. He then asked him, what does he think that Japan needs right now? He is confused. Was he referring to the crystals? He replies no, that he is not referring to the crystal. Japan requires just one blow. A colossal blow is essential. Japan, by its very nature, is a nation that only stirs with a significant shock. Just look at the invasion, the black sheep, or even the words. It takes a significant something to awaken the people from their slumber, a wound that stings. He then goes on saying that the grand finale of this release unleashing the level crystal on the chimera. Mizuki is concerned that is it really going to be okay that such a dangerous monster itself will jump up by 20 points. He shared that how if they boosted by 20 all at once, it could evolve into the boss chimera. After chipping away at the HP in the drill, they install the safety device and put it to use, and it could be seen that how their behavior is changing. When one reached that level, standard infantry weapons become obsolete. It all is about the recoil rifles, tanks, and ultimately airstrikes. They confirm that, record the footage and safely dispose of the target, and will upload the video online. Mizuki shows his concern that what if this creature were to wander into a populated area. He then shares that's why he wants him to truly grasp the urgency of practical training and the need for reform. And with that, this round of drills can come to an end. He then asks Mizuki if he has any desire to serve the country. He is confused. Why was Hamada asking him this question? After this conversation with Hamada, he goes to Carol's room instead of his own. He tells Carol everything about the conversation with Hamada. She is confused, so Mizuki was suddenly scouted out of the blue and rushed towards her room late at night because of sudden anxiety. He says that that's one way to put it, but for now he has to decide to put it on hold. Carol thinks it is a bit selfish to only rely on her when it suits him, and she is just a convenient girl for him. Mizuki disagrees. He thinks that it is not just when it's convenient. He's always leaning on her. She comments that he's just a freeloader by nature. He then adds that it's as he interpreted as it is mutual since they have both been under some mental assault. Carol thinks that there is some truth to that. Carol shares that she has heard some whisper that Major Hamada is leading an unofficial troop. She is confused as to why he was so afraid as Mizuki is in Hamada's good books. And after all, he also got the stamp of approval on him, and if they could absorb Mizuki and the whole team, that would be a dream come true. It's just that their eyes don't seem to match their words. He is also concerned as Keshi can't even read his mind, and it's a bit creepy to him if he was being honest.